Ethan Carter had $352 in his pocket, and less than 24 hours before the hospital would cut off his little girl's cancer treatment forever. He had already sold his truck, his tools, even pawned his late wife's wedding ring. But nothing was enough. Tonight, as fluorescent lights flickered across sterile white walls, a desperate father with a pistol stormed into the children's wing and leveled the weapon at the one person fighting to keep Ethan's daughter alive. Ethan didn't stop to think. He didn't wonder what might happen to him. He saw Dr. Grace Lynn's wide eyes, saw Lily, frozen, just steps away, clutching her stuffed rabbit, and in that heartbeat, he made his choice. He hurled himself into the line of fire. Follow this story to the end, and don't forget to tell me in the comments which city you're watching from so I'll know just how far this story has traveled. The shot cracked like thunder inside the hospital corridor, a sound so wrong in a place built for healing that every head turned in horror. Time fractured for Ethan Carter. He felt the burn of impact searing into his chest, a force that lifted him backward, as if the earth itself had shoved him away from his daughter. His vision exploded into white sparks, sound dulled, and the sterile hallway blurred into streaks of color blue, scrubs, red. Exit signs, the gray shine of linoleum floors. He fell hard. Breath ripped from his lungs, the taste of iron flooding his mouth. Somewhere above him, voices were screaming. He couldn't make out the words, just noise, panicked, terrified noise. Through the haze, he heard the smallest sound cut through the chaos. Daddy Lily's cry, high, fragile, full of fear. He tried to turn his head. His body refused. The ceiling light swam, multiplying, spinning. Warmth spilled down his side, soaking his shirt until it clung heavy against his skin. Then a face leaned over him. Dr. Grace Lynn. Her hands pressed desperately against his wound, her dark hair falling loose from its tie. Her lips trembling, though her voice fought to stay calm. Stay with me, Ethan. Don't you dare close your eyes. Do you hear me? We're going to fix this. Just keep breathing. Her voice faded in and out like a radio losing signal. Ethan forced himself to focus on her eyes, brown fierce, refusing to give up. The same eyes that had watched over Lily for months through chemo sessions and fevers, and nights when hope seemed paper thin. The world around them was chaos. Security guards wrestled the gunman to the floor, his anguished shouts echoing through the halls. Nurses pulled Lily into their arms, shielding her from the blood, from the violence that no child should ever see. Ethan wanted to call out to her to tell her everything was going to be okay, but the words caught trapped under the weight pressing on his chest. He saw only her small face framed by golden hair damp with tears before his vision swam again. Darkness pressed close, and then silence. But let's not stay in this silence. Because Ethan's story is not only about one bullet in a hospital hallway, it's about the months that led here, the slow, grinding weight of bills and treatments, of sleepless nights and impossible choices. It's about a single father broken and rebuilding, holding on to love like it was the only thing left. 6 months earlier, Ethan Carter had still believed in steady work and small miracles. Back then, mornings began with the rumble of his old Ford truck, the smell of strong coffee in a travel mug, and Lily's laughter as she kissed him goodbye at the door. Their house wasn't much, 2 bedrooms peeling paint on the porch, but it was theirs. He worked construction good hours, decent pay insurance that seemed enough. And though grief still hung in the corners since Anna's accident 3 years ago had ripped his wife from their lives, there was light. That light was Lily. She was 7 small for her age, but fierce in spirit, with a smile so bright it pulled him out of bed on the darkest mornings. He thought they had weathered the worst. He thought losing Anna had been the storm, and now they were building something steady again. Until autumn came. Until Lily began to fade. At first it was little things. She tired easily on the playground. She bruised from the smallest bumps. Ethan noticed her nosebleeds, terrifying, sudden, too frequent. He brushed back her hair one night and saw the paleness in her face, the shadow under her eyes, and fear curled tight in his gut. He carried her to the pediatrician expecting iron supplements, maybe a lecture about better meals. Instead, the doctor frowned at the blood work and spoke the word that knocked the breath out of him. Leukemia. It slammed into Ethan like a wrecking ball, knocking loose every certainty he had left. That evening, sitting in their kitchen with the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence, Ethan stared at Lily, coloring at the table. Her small hand gripped a crayon, her tongue poking out in concentration. And he thought, How do I tell her that her childhood just ended? He didn't tell her not all at once. He let the doctors explain in pieces while he held her hand and promised it was all just medicine to make her strong. He smiled when he wanted to break. He whispered, "It's going to be okay," until the words lost meaning in his mouth. And then the whirlwind began. Hospital visits every other day. Chemotherapy that made Lily's golden hair fall in clumps onto her pillow. Nights spent hunched over a basin while she vomited, trembling, asking in a weak voice why medicine that was supposed to help hurt so badly. "Because it's fighting the bad cells," Princess Ethan told her, brushing damp strands from her forehead, "like tiny soldiers in your body. They make you sick now so they can make you strong again later." But even soldiers came at a cost. The bills piled faster than he could open them. Insurance covered only fragments, leaving deductibles and copays that swallowed his paycheck whole. He maxed out credit cards. He borrowed against his 401k. When that wasn't enough, he pawned Anna's wedding ring, the act that nearly broke him completely. Every envelope in the mailbox was another threat. Every ringing phone a demand for money he didn't have. And yet, in those nights when Lily finally slept, when the glow of the streetlight fell across her thin face, Ethan made silent promises. "I will not let you die. I will burn down the world before I let them take you from me." It was a vow whispered into the dark. A vow that would lead months later to a hospital corridor lit with fluorescent light and the taste of blood in his mouth. But in that first month back, when hope still clung to him like morning dew, Ethan believed sheer determination could carry them. He believed love would be enough. He had no idea how wrong he was. The days after Lily's diagnosis blurred into each other a carousel of white hallways, antiseptic smells, and the sharp sting of IV needles. Ethan Carter became a man of two worlds. In one, he still carried drywall and hammered nails, trying to keep his construction job steady. In the other, he sat in vinyl chairs beside his daughter, watching nurses in blue scrubs hang bags of fluid that dripped slowly into her veins. He had never felt so powerless. Every morning began with the same ritual. He woke before dawn, the apartment still cold, and stood in the doorway of Lily's bedroom. She always seemed smaller under the blankets her body lost in pajamas that had once fit snug. Sometimes she stirred mumbling, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Other times she slept so still that Ethan leaned closer just to see the rise and fall of her chest. Then came the long bus ride to the hospital, because the truck had already been sold. He remembered the last day he drove it. His hands tight on the steering wheel, Lily humming in the passenger seat, her head wrapped in a pink scarf to hide the hair loss. He pulled into the pawn shop pretending it was just another errand. He told her it was a grown-up thing. Inside, handing over the keys, he felt like he was giving away the last piece of his pride. "Daddy, will we get it back?" Lily had asked. Someday he lied. But there was no someday. The treatments cost $8,000 each, twice a week. Even before the ink dried on one bill, another arrived. Ethan's hands, calloused from years of construction, trembled as he opened envelopes. Each one was another blow, another reminder that money had more power over life than love did. At night, when Lily finally drifted off after chemo sessions that left her trembling and sick, Ethan sat in the kitchen with a calculator and a notebook. He scribbled numbers, trying to stretch his $15 an hour wage across rent, food, utilities, and medical bills that climbed like ivy across every corner of their lives. He borrowed tools from coworkers after pawning his own. He took extra shifts stocking shelves at a grocery store until dawn, then showed up at construction sites, running on fumes. On weekends, he scrubbed office floors, the smell of bleach clinging to him as he stumbled home to find Lily asleep on the couch, cartoons still flickering on the TV, and always she smiled when she saw him. "Daddy, you look tired," she would say, crawling into his lap. "I'm fine, Princess," he whispered, kissing the crown of her head, inhaling the faint strawberry scent of her shampoo. "As long as you're okay, I'm fine." But she wasn't okay. The medicine made her nauseous. Her golden hair fell out in clumps that tangled in the brush. Bruises spread like storm clouds across her arms. Her bright eyes dulled with exhaustion. One evening, after a brutal round of chemo, Lily curled in his arms and asked the question that shattered him. Daddy, why do I have to take the medicine that makes me sick? Ethan's throat closed. He pressed his lips against her temple, buying seconds before he spoke. Because it's fighting the bad guys in your body, he whispered. The medicine is like tiny soldiers. They make you sick now, but they're fighting so you can get better later. Her thin arms circled his neck. She didn't answer, but he felt her body shudder against him. When she finally fell asleep, Ethan stared at the ceiling, his eyes burning. He hated himself for the lie, for the cruel truth that the medicine was both saving and breaking her. But what choice did he have? Dr. Grace Lynn entered their lives like a flame in the darkness. She was young, tireless, and determined to fight for Lily as if she were her own child. Ethan remembered the first time he met her. She sat across from him in a cramped consultation room, paperwork spread across the table, her voice calm but urgent. We're going to do everything we can, she promised. Lily's numbers show we caught this early. If we keep the protocol steady for 6 months, there's a strong chance of remission. 6 months. Ethan repeated the number ringing in his ears like an impossible finish line. Grace leaned forward, her eyes steady. But it means staying consistent. No interruptions. Every treatment matters. He nodded, though inside he was already calculating the cost. 6 months of treatments at $8,000 each. Nearly $400,000. A number so large it didn't feel real. Still, Grace gave him hope. She fought insurance companies like a soldier in her own war. She filled out grant applications, argued with administrators, even slipped him pharmacy receipts she had paid herself when he wasn't looking. Ethan noticed. One evening after Lily was settled with a coloring book, he found Grace in the hallway, slumped against the wall. Exhaustion etched into her face. You don't have to do this, he told her softly. She looked up, her eyes rimmed with fatigue but burning with resolve. I can't not do it. She deserves a chance. You both do. For a moment, Ethan saw Anna in her, the same fierce compassion, the same unwillingness to give up. His chest ached with gratitude he didn't know how to voice. But beneath that gratitude was fear, because no matter how hard Grace fought, the bills didn't stop. They came like waves, crashing harder every week, threatening to drown them both. And Ethan knew there was only so long a man could tread water before he sank. Late one night after finishing his shift cleaning offices, Ethan returned home to find Lily asleep on the couch. The glow from the TV flickered across her pale face. A stack of envelopes lay on the table, red letters stamped "Past Due." He sat down heavily, rubbing his temples. His wallet contained less than $400. Rent was overdue. The electricity bill threatened shut-off, and the hospital wanted thousands more by the end of the week. He reached for Anna's photo on the mantel, her smile frozen in time, her eyes bright with the joy of holding newborn Lily. I don't know how to do this without you, he whispered. I'm trying, but God, I'm so tired. The silence of the room pressed in, broken only by Lily's soft breathing. Ethan buried his face in his hands. The vow he had made to protect his daughter felt like a rope pulling tighter around his chest, because for the first time he felt it slipping, and that terrified him more than anything else in the world. Winter crept in quietly, dusting the city in frost and gray skies. For Ethan Carter, the cold was just another weight to carry. Each morning he left the apartment before sunrise, bundled in his only heavy coat, his breath puffing in the freezing air as he trudged to the bus stop. His boots were worn thin. His hands, once steady from years of carpentry and construction, shook from exhaustion. Inside the hospital, the warmth of the heaters did nothing to chase away the chill in his bones. He sat beside Lily as nurses threaded IV lines into her thin arms, her skin translucent under the fluorescent light. She had grown quieter these days, too tired to talk much. Her eyes, once full of sparkle, now stared blankly at the cartoons playing on the TV mounted to the wall. Ethan held her hand anyway. He whispered small jokes, stories about when she was a baby, anything to stir a smile. Sometimes he got one. Most days he didn't. He told himself it was enough just to be there, to keep showing up no matter how little sleep he'd had or how sore his body felt from stocking shelves until dawn. But beneath the surface, cracks were spreading. Bills continued to multiply. Each envelope that arrived was heavier than the last. His credit cards were maxed out. His 401k was drained. Even the few dollars from selling Anna's wedding ring had vanished into a sea of payments that never seemed to shrink. Every time Ethan picked up the phone, it was another demand for money. Collection agents spoke with voices like stone. "Mr. Carter, if you don't settle this account, we'll have to escalate further." He wanted to scream at them. "Do you know what escalation means for me? It means my daughter doesn't get her medicine. It means she dies." But he didn't scream. He just hung up, stared at the ceiling, and prayed no one would notice the tears burning in his eyes. Lily noticed. One night she found him at the kitchen table staring at a pile of bills. She padded into the room in her pajamas, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Daddy, are you sad?" she asked, her small voice trembling. Ethan forced a smile, swiping at his eyes. "No, sweetheart, just tired." She tilted her head, studying him with the same sharp intuition Anna had always had. Then she climbed onto his lap and pressed her cheek against his chest. "I don't like when you're sad," she whispered. He wrapped his arms around her, breathing in the faint strawberry scent of her shampoo. "I'll be okay," he promised. "As long as you're okay, I'll always be okay." It wasn't true, but it was what she needed to hear. Dr. Grace Lynn saw the truth. She noticed the shadows under Ethan's eyes, the way his hands trembled when he filled out paperwork. She noticed how thin he had grown skipping meals so Lily could eat. One evening after treatment, she pulled him aside. "Ethan," she said softly, "you can't keep doing this alone." He shook his head. "What choice do I have?" Grace hesitated. Then she placed a hand on his arm, her touch gentle but firm. "I've applied for every grant I can find. I've argued with the insurance company. I even covered part of last month's meds myself, but I can't keep patching holes forever. You need help." Ethan swallowed hard, his throat aching. "There is no help, not for people like us." Her eyes softened. "That's not true." He wanted to believe her, but every letter, every phone call, every dollar slipping through his fingers told him otherwise. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning. The sky outside was a slate-gray snowflakes drifting past the hospital windows. Ethan had just settled Lily into her chair with her coloring books when a woman from billing tapped him on the shoulder. "Mr. Carter, could I speak with you a moment?" He followed her down a hallway that smelled faintly of bleach. She handed him a paper, her expression rehearsed, polite but cold. "The administration requires immediate payment of $63,000 to continue Lily's treatment." Ethan stared at the number, the ink blurring. 63,000. His voice cracked. "Yes, sir. Without payment, she will be discharged tomorrow." His chest hollowed. "And if I can't pay?" Her silence was the answer. When she finally spoke, her tone was clipped, almost mechanical. "The county facility will accept her as a patient." Ethan felt his knees weaken. Everyone in the waiting rooms had whispered about the county facility. Understaffed, underfunded, a place where children didn't recover, they waited to die. He staggered back to the waiting area, his vision swimming. Lily looked up from her crayons and smiled at him. "Daddy, look. I drew a butterfly." He forced a smile, nodding. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." But inside, he was breaking. That night, their apartment felt colder than ever. Lily curled up on the couch, her body thin and fragile, her lips tinged with blue. She whimpered softly in her sleep, and every sound tore into Ethan like a blade. On the table in front of him lay a spread of bills, eviction notices, shut-off warnings, and now the hospital's demand for $63,000. His wallet held $347, the last of his money after buying Lily's pain medicine. He picked up his phone and began dialing every number Grace had given him. Charities, foundations, nonprofits. Most calls went unanswered. Those who did answer spoke with sympathy but no solutions. "We have a waiting list months long. You don't meet the requirements." "I'm sorry." Hours slipped away. Midnight. 1 a.m., 2. His voice cracked from repeating the same desperate plea. By 3 a.m., he sat slumped at the table, the glow of his phone screen harsh against his tired eyes. He was looking at words he never thought he'd read: medical bankruptcy. He scrolled through articles, legal websites, warnings about credit scores and lawsuits. But none of it mattered. Because bankruptcy wouldn't help Lily tomorrow. It wouldn't keep her alive. And she needed help tomorrow. When dawn finally broke, Ethan carried Lily into the hospital, her small body limp against his chest. Her breath was shallow, her lips pale. She whispered, "Daddy, don't feel good." He kissed her hair, whispering back, "I know, princess, the doctors are going to take care of you." But he knew the truth. This was the last day. Tomorrow the doors would close, and he would be forced to watch his daughter slip away, not because the cancer had beaten her, but because he couldn't afford to save her. That thought, more than the sleepless nights, more than the weight of exhaustion, was what finally broke him. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and coffee that morning. A faint chill from the February air slipped in each time the sliding doors opened, carrying with it the sound of traffic outside. Inside, life seemed suspended in sterile brightness, nurses wheeling carts, doctors moving briskly down corridors, children's cries echoing faintly from treatment rooms. Ethan Carter sat at the waiting area with Lily curled against his side, her head on his shoulder. She was too weak to color today. Her crayon sat untouched in a plastic bag at her feet, the stuffed rabbit limp in her lap. Ethan kissed the crown of her head, the weight of her fragile body pressing into him like a reminder of time slipping away. His mind replayed the words from billing like a broken record. $63,000. 24 hours. Tomorrow she would be discharged. Tomorrow she would die. Dr. Grace Lynn appeared clipboard in hand. She always wore the same white coat, the same air of calm determination. But today her shoulders sagged and her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Ethan," she said softly, "can we talk?" He nodded, careful not to wake Lily. He laid her gently across the waiting bench, tucking the rabbit into her arms, and followed Grace down a side hallway. Her voice was low when she spoke. "I fought for you. I went to the board again this morning, but without payment, they'll discharge her tomorrow." "I'm so sorry." The words stabbed deep, though Ethan had expected them. His throat tightened, his jaw clenched. He wanted to rage, to shout, but the weight of his exhaustion smothered even anger. Grace touched his arm. "There might be one possibility." He looked up desperate. "There's an experimental program at the university," she explained. "They're testing a new therapy protocol for pediatric leukemia. The early results are promising." Ethan frowned. "Experimental?" She nodded. "Yes. It's unproven. There are risks, side effects we don't fully understand. The survival rate so far is about 60%. 60. The number echoed in his head, frightening and fragile. He turned his gaze toward the hallway where Lily lay, her small fingers curled around her rabbit. He remembered Anna's laugh, the promises they had whispered when Lily was born that their daughter would grow up safe, strong, free. "What's her chance if we do nothing?" Ethan asked quietly. Grace's eyes shimmered. She shook her head. "I can't give false hope." The silence between them spoke louder than words. Before Ethan could answer, the sharp crack of chaos tore through the building. "Everyone down! Get down! Now!" The shout echoed like a gunshot through the emergency department. Then came the crash of something metallic hitting the floor, the panicked cries of staff scattering for cover. Ethan froze. Grace's face went pale. From their corner of the hallway, Lily's coloring book tumbled to the ground, crayons scattering across the tiles. "Daddy!" Her small voice rose in panic. Ethan whipped around. Lily was gone from the bench. She had wandered toward the vending machines, drawn by their glowing lights. Now she stood halfway down the corridor, caught between safety and the chaos erupting in the emergency wing. Lily Ethan's voice broke. The glass doors to the ER burst open. A man stumbled out, his face twisted with grief and rage, his hand shaking around the metallic gleam of a pistol. "Stay back," he roared. Nurses screamed. Security guards froze, hands raised. The man's eyes were bloodshot, his chest heaving with sobs. "I just wanted to see my son," he cried, his voice breaking. "They wouldn't let me see my boy." Ethan's heart lurched. He recognized that voice, that desperation. This wasn't a criminal. This was a father. Grace stepped forward. Her hands raised, her voice steady, despite the fear etched across her face. "Sir, please. Whatever happened, we can help you. Put the gun down. No one needs to get hurt." The man's laugh was bitter, broken. "Help? You don't help anyone. You count money while children die. My Tommy died because I couldn't pay. He was only 5. Ethan felt the words slam into him like another blow. Tommy. The man's child had died from the same disease that was killing Lily, the same unbearable financial weight, the same cruel system. The gunman's sobs shook his whole body. He swung the pistol wildly, eyes blazing with grief. Grace froze just 15 feet from Lily, caught in the line of fire. Ethan's vision narrowed. Time slowed to single heartbeats. He thought of Anna gone too soon. He thought of Lily's thin arms around his neck, whispering she trusted him to keep her safe. He thought of the promise he had made to himself in the quiet of their apartment. I will not let you die. Now in this moment, that vow meant something different, because the woman standing in the gunman's sights, the woman who had fought, begged, and even spent her own money to keep Lily alive, was in danger, and Ethan knew what he had to do. The pistol jerked upward, the man's finger tightening on the trigger. Grace's eyes widened, her body frozen in fear. No! Ethan's roar tore from his throat as he launched forward. The explosion of sound filled the hallway, louder than thunder. The bullet meant for Grace slammed into Ethan's chest, spinning him around and crashing him to the floor. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then chaos erupted, guards tackling the gunman, nurses screaming, Lily shrieking. Daddy, blood spread across Ethan's shirt like a red flower blooming too fast. Grace dropped beside him, her hands pressing down, her voice fierce. Stay with me, Ethan. Don't you dare leave her. Don't you dare! Ethan tried to breathe, his chest burning, his vision dimming. He saw Lily's tear-streaked face as a nurse pulled her back, her tiny arms reaching for him. In that instant, he didn't think about money or debts or even survival. He thought about love, the kind that sacrifices without hesitation. And as darkness pressed in, Ethan whispered the only thing that mattered. Take care of my Lily. The hallway erupted into moving parts that didn't feel human. Shoes squealing on tile gurney wheels, rattling radios, crackling with clipped commands that sounded like another language. Code blue trauma, adult male. Chest wound type and cross 2 units, make it 4. Call thoracic. Call trauma. Call everybody. Hands hovered and pressed and lifted. A nurse named Cam cut Ethan's shirt from collar to hem, scissors biting through cotton that was already soaked a violent red. Another nurse, Priya, slapped gauze pads down her palms, steady, her jaw set. Someone shoved an oxygen mask over Ethan's face. Plastic, a hint of disinfectant. The world grew narrow, tunneled into a dim tube where voices echoed and light flared. Dr. Grace Lynn didn't step back. She leaned in. Her fingers never left the wound. Ethan, look at me, she ordered, voice firm, warm, almost furious at the very air for daring to leave his lungs. Stay with me. You hear me? Breathe. His eyes fluttered. The ceiling swam, blocks of glaring white seams and vents blurring in and out. He felt pressure, a deep, crushing ache spreading across his ribs. Every breath rasped like dragging something heavy over broken glass. Daddy! The sound sliced through the noise. Lily! Ethan tried to turn his head toward the cry. A gloved hand locked his jaw in place. Don't move, someone said. Sir, don't move. Across the hall, a nurse scooped Lily up, her stuffed rabbit dangling from one ear. The nurse murmured something soft into Lily's hair and back toward the family lounge. Lily reached toward the gurney anyway, tiny fingers opening and closing around air. I'm right here, Princess, Ethan tried to say. The mask swallowed the words. Only a whisper leaked out, vapor fogging the plastic. By the ER doors, 2 security officers pressed the gunman to the floor, arms twisted behind his back, cuffs ratcheting shut with a metallic bite. He didn't fight. He didn't look like a villain. He looked hollowed out, emptied by grief. His face crumpled as he stared at the blood spreading beneath the gurney. I just wanted to see my boy, he said, voice shattering on the last word. They wouldn't let me get him out. Someone snapped. Grace looked up at that man for a breath, just a breath. In her eyes flashed anger and pity. Then she was back over Ethan's hands, clamped hard. Pressure's dropping, she said. We're losing it. Move, now. They ran. The gurney slammed through double doors into a corridor colder than the lobby, the air tasting like metal and winter. Posters of smiling cartoon bears lined the walls. Be brave, you are strong, and each one felt in this moment like a cruel cosmic joke. Or 2 is prepped. A voice called ahead. Anesthesia standing by. Page cardiothoracic, Grace said, not bothering to see if anyone answered. And have a chest tube tray ready? I've got it, Cam said. jogging beside the gurney IFU bags swinging. The overhead lights flicked by in quick strobing rhythm. Ethan blinked. Each blink was a new place, a new noise, a new face leaning in with eyes that tried to be confident and kept failing. The oxygen mask hissed with each inhale. A dragon curled against his mouth. His edges went soft, then sharp, then soft again. A Flash's kitchen at home. Anna's photo on the mantel. The last morning before the accident, her hair twisted up, her laughter spilling over the clatter of a skillet. The smell of bacon. The sound of Lily's baby giggle. Another Flash, Lily last week, weak but stubborn, insisting he draw a butterfly with her. His butterfly looked like a crumpled leaf. She had laughed and kissed his cheek and said it was perfect. Another Grace in the hallway, a stack of forms, her voice telling him 6 more months could bring remission. If they could hold the line. If they could keep going. The gurney lurched to a stop, or doors yawed open, bright as a sunrise. Cold air rolled out, scrubbed, sterile, merciless. On 3, Cam said, 1, 2, 3. They lifted him to the operating table. The room bloomed around him, steel instruments, gleaming monitors, chirping in restless arrangements, a hum out of sight like a giant machine purring to itself. A new face leaned over him, eyes magnified behind protective lenses. Mr. Carter. I'm Dr. Klein, anesthesia, the man said. Voice calm, practiced. We're going to take good care of you. I need you to keep breathing with me for a moment. The mask changed. Another plastic dome descended, sweet chemical, a candy-sick smell that filled Ethan's head. Ethan, Grace said, appearing in the small circle where his eyes still saw. Her hair was tucked under a cap now. Only the fierce line of her mouth told him she was the same woman who'd fought for Lily across 1,000 front desks. Listen to me. He tried to nod. Couldn't. He blinked instead, slow, deliberate. If anything, his voice was barely air. If anything happens, nothing is going to happen. If it does, he insisted, promise me. The experimental program. Get Lily in. Promise me. A beat. A war flickered under Grace's calm. She knew promises were dangerous, but she also knew this was a battlefield and the man beneath her had thrown himself onto a grenade for someone else. I promise, she said. On my license, on my life. His body eased at the words, a tiny lessening like a fist unclenching. Tears slid warm into his hairline, stinging where antiseptic had already burned. Tell her. The room tilted. The ceiling stretched. Tell her I'm... Tell her yourself, Grace said, and for a heartbeat her hand left his wound and found his fingers. She squeezed quick and fierce. You tell her yourself. Pressure 80 over palp, someone announced. Sats dropping, 92-90. Let's go, a surgeon's voice cut through. Scalpel. The world yanked sideways. Time lost its shape. The first touch of the blade felt like a line of cold fire across his chest, but the pain was distant, second hand already being drowned under the sweet flood climbing up the back of his throat toward his eyes. The anesthesiologist murmured something, a soft hiss, a lullaby that smelled like plastic and snow. Outside the OR, the hallway had quieted, as if the building itself was holding its breath. The hospital director, Jonathan Hale, stood with his tie askew, shirt sleeves rolled, face paled to the color of copy paper. He had been woken by a call, had driven through red lights, and now stared at a smear of blood drying on tile 2 corridors away. His hospital. His. Lock down the wing, he told a charge nurse. Escort all non-essential staff to the family lounge. And he looked back toward the ER doors where the gunman had been led away. For a long second, something like grief or memory crossed his face. Then he nodded once, as if to a person only he could see. Make sure the little girl is with someone calm, someone kind. Yes, sir. In the family lounge, a nurse named Sophia sat on the floor with Lily cross-legged, the stuffed rabbit between them. The TV was on, but muted. Soft cartoons flickered as if they too were afraid to make noise. Lily's cheeks shone with salt tracks. She kept pressing her palms together like she was squeezing a wish out of air. Your dad is brave, Sophia whispered. I've seen Brave. He's the bravest. Lily looked up, eyes wet, and nodded once like she had known that all along. Back in the corridor outside the OR, Grace stood at the scrub sink, hands pink from harsh soap eyes, fixed on nothing. The water ran so hot it steamed. She didn't feel it. She watched it streak over her fingers anyway, felt the phantom memory of Ethan's blood on her skin. She closed her eyes. For a fraction of a second, she wasn't a doctor. She was a woman who had been handed the heart of a family and asked not to drop it. The chapel was 2 floors down, small, wood-paneled, dim. She found it without remembering deciding to go. She slid into the last pew palms, still damp, the hospital badge at her collar cold against her throat. She had never been good at prayers. She was good at protocols, pathways, papers, peer-reviewed results. She was good at calls and recalls and dosage adjustments written on sticky notes at 3 a.m. She believed in science and stubborn effort, in small victories stitched together until they made something like a miracle. And still, "Please," she whispered into the hush. "Please." No bargain, no list, just the word and all that it held. In OR, 2 monitors beeped in a pattern that made sense to the people who could read them. Dr. Klein adjusted a drip with his left hand, watched numbers rise and fall, nodded at changes only he seemed to see. The trauma surgeon worked with quick, economical movements. A scrub tech anticipated instruments before a request finished leaving the surgeon's lips. Under bright light inside a chest that had taken a bullet, meant for someone else, blood moved and then mercifully kept moving. Ethan floated. He was in a hallway of his own, but it was made of memory. He walked past the room where Lily had taken her first steps. Tiny feet slapping wood, Anna filming on her phone and laughing so hard she couldn't hold it steady. He walked past a beach neither of them had reached, imagined, planned, promised sand stinging their ankles. Lily building a lopsided castle, while Anna pressed wet hair behind her ears and told him he looked ridiculous in a floppy hat. He walked past a dark room where he had sat alone with bills and whispered vows to the air. He stopped at a door he hadn't noticed before. It wasn't a hospital door. It wasn't a house door. It was simply there, painted the blue of Lily's favorite sweater. He touched the knob. It wasn't cold. It wasn't hot. It was exactly his skin temperature, like it had been waiting for his hand. On the other side, he heard a sound like wings. Not birds, not angels. Something softer, closer. Butterflies. The smell of strawberries drifted through a hint of Lily's shampoo. He smiled even as far away a machine chirped a warning and steady hands moved faster. "Clamp," the surgeon said. "Clamp," the tech answered, pressing metal into an open palm. "Suction, suction. Okay. There. A breath. There." From the gallery out of sight, the red-in-use light glowed above the door. A clock ticked softly, indifferent to the devastation and devotion unfolding beneath it. Time didn't stretch for anyone. People stretched inside of time to try to fit what mattered. Grace rose from the chapel pew and stood for a second with her hand on the back of the bench, gathering herself, as if gathering loose threads to braid into a single rope. She didn't wipe her eyes. She didn't need to. She turned and walked back toward the elevators, toward the floor, where people were still waiting to find out if love could outlast a hole torn through a chest by a stranger's grief. When the elevator doors slid open, Jonathan Hale stepped out. They nearly collided. His eyes took her in the damp hair at her temples, the way she stood like her bones were buzzing. "Dr. Lin," he said quietly, and everything unspoken in this place cracked through his voice. "We're with you." She nodded. Words were too heavy. She couldn't lift them. She passed him and kept going. Outside or two, she paused. The sounds on the other side of the door were muffled but alive. She placed her palm flat against the cool metal, a gesture that was not scientific, not necessary, not anything a medical textbook would recognize. Then she stepped back, drew a breath, and pushed through the scrub room doors. Inside, the lights were bright as noon. The work was careful, relentless, alive. "Vitals responding," Dr. Klein said. "Hold that." "Good. Hold." The surgeon didn't look up. Almost there. And far away in a lounge that smelled faintly of crayons and hand sanitizer, Lily held her rabbit to her chest and whispered to it like it was a phone to heaven. "Don't be scared, Daddy. I'm right here." The scalpel paused. The hand that held it did not tremble. The clock on the wall clicked over 1 minute. Then another. Nothing in the hospital moved that didn't have to. Everything that mattered hung in that white light like breath. And the line between losing and keeping thinned. The line between losing and keeping thinned, then tugged, then by some stubborn hands, and a threadbare mercy held. Got control, the trauma surgeon said at last. Voice flat with focus, not triumph. Clamps secure, lacerations packed. Chest tube in, lung re-expanding. Pressure stabilizing 85-92. Holding? Dr. Klein added eyes on the monitor. Keep him steady. The light stayed too bright. The air stayed too cold. But somewhere beneath the glare and the stainless steel, a pulse answered. Not strong, not sure, but present. They closed with careful, patient movements. The sound of the suction softened, then went silent. Tape pressed flat against skin, dressings layered like small white promises. ICU bed, the surgeon asked. Ready, Cam said, already moving. Grace exhaled for the first time in what felt like an hour and a century. It wasn't relief, not yet. It was a breath she'd been holding so long, her ribs hurt. She looked at Ethan's face, washed pale under the sterile light, and said so quietly, no one else heard, "You keep your end. I'll keep mine." They wheeled him out. The OR doors swung and shut. The red light above the lintel slipped from in use to nothing at all. Two floors down, the chapel's stained glass threw fractured colors across empty pews. A votive flickered. Grace had been there minutes earlier, a whispered "please" still echoing somewhere in the wood. Now she walked the hallway toward the family lounge, stripping off gloves, tucking her cap into a pocket she didn't remember having. Inside the lounge, cartoons still played on mute. Lily sat small on a vinyl chair, Sophia beside her, the stuffed rabbit folded against her ribs like a shield. When Lily saw Grace in the doorway, she stood too fast and swayed, catching herself on the chair arm. "Is my daddy?" Grace went to one knee so her eyes and Lily's were level. "He's out of surgery," she said gently. "He fought hard. He's going upstairs to a special room where they can watch him every second." Is he okay?" "He's here." Grace didn't lie. She also didn't let go of hope. "He needs time, but he's here." Lily nodded once, like she was memorizing the words to recite to herself later. She looked at the rabbit, then back to Grace. "Can I see him?" "Soon," Grace promised. "When they say it's safe." She glanced at Sophia. "Could you stay with her a little longer?" "Of course." Lily's fingers clutched Grace's sleeve. "You won't leave him, right?" Grace's throat tightened. "I won't," she said. "I won't leave him." The ICU smelled like sanitizer and humming electricity. Machines blinked soft constellations. Nurses moved with the kind of quiet speed that only comes from long practice at racing without noise. Ethan lay beneath warmed blankets, his chest bandaged, a tube hissing at his side. Another line delivering slow, measured medicine into a vein that looked too fragile for such burdens. Grace read the notes at the foot of the bed, the surgeon's tight handwriting. Left lung collapse. Spleen nicked. Massive blood loss. Repairs in place. Watch for arrhythmia. Watch for bleeding. Watch everything. She stepped close and laid her hand lightly on his forearm. His skin was cool under the warming device, the hairs flattened where tape had been peeled and reapplied. "You told me to tell her," she whispered, "but you're going to do that yourself. That's the deal." Outside the glass, a shadow paused. Hospital Director Jonathan Hale stood with a clipboard he didn't need, and a heaviness he could not put down. When Grace stepped out, he straightened reflexively as if there were cameras. There were none. There was only his conscience, which had grown louder in the last hour than it had been in years. "How is he alive?" Grace said. "That's what I can tell you." Hale nodded once. His tie was still crooked. His eyes were the eyes of a man who had read too many ledgers and not enough letters from parents. "Security's managing the incident," he said. "The police have the man in custody." Grace's jaw ticked. The man is a father whose child died because help ran out when the money did. Hale flinched, not at the words, but at the clean way she said them. "We'll review protocols," he began, and then stopped. The script tasted stale. "It won't be enough." No, Grace agreed. "It won't." Silence stretched. In it, the steady beep of Ethan's heart monitor, threaded through like a metronome, set a little too slow. Hale cleared his throat. "Dr. Lin, there's a separate matter I should raise. Not now, but soon." Her eyes sharpened. "If it concerns Mr. Carter and his daughter, raise it now." His gaze flicked once toward Ethan's bed. Something softened there. Your patient's late wife was an employee in our system, he said carefully. A nurse. There has been an ongoing legal dispute over her life insurance. I will have an update shortly. Shortly. Grace repeated the word, brittle as glass. Get me answers. Hale nodded and stepped away, pulling his phone from his pocket as he went. The call he placed to General Counsel rang twice. Linda, it's Hale. I need the appellate status on Sarah Carter's claim. Now please. He listened, his shoulders squared. Text me the ruling. And Linda, thank you. Night folded itself over the city, over the hospital, over the small square of window visible from Ethan's room. The ICU lights dimmed a fraction. Machines kept their vigil. The nurse at the desk, a man named Mateo, with kind eyes and a quiet hum in his throat, logged vitals every 15 minutes like clockwork. At 2:11 a.m., Ethan's heart stuttered, a hiccup in the pattern. One beat missed. Another. Alarms woke into full voice. VTAC Mateo said, already at the bedside, already calling out. Room 14 code to room 14. The room flooded with people who knew exactly how to move around each other without colliding. Hands on chest, hands on pads, charging to 200. Clear, a brief violent light, a body's tiny jerk. Grace arrived at a run, hair loose lab coat thrown over scrubs. She went to the foot of the bed, eyes only for the monitor. Beat, beat, beat. The line found its rhythm again. Not perfect. Present. She let out a breath that trembled and then didn't. Thank you, she said to no one and everyone. Mateo set fresh strips on the clipboard tape, hissing off the roll. He likes drama, he said gently, as if that could make the true thing any less sharp. Grace rested her knuckles on the rail. He's a father, she said. They always do. The room emptied back to hums and quiet. Grace stayed. At 3:07, she called the pediatric oncology fellow at the university program. It went to voicemail. She called the principal investigator's personal line. It rang 6 times and then, to her shock, clicked. Dr. Myers, a tired voice said. Grace Lynn Children's, she said in one breath. I have a 7-year-old with all. Early response was excellent. Insurance interrupted continuity. We're about to be forced off protocol. I need her in your trial. Compassionate use if necessary. Criteria. She listed them fast as beads on a string. Labs, history, comorbidities, performance status, the father's injury, the urgency. There was a pause. Paper rustled at the other end, the sound of someone sitting up in bed. You're asking me to open a slot outside rotation. I'm asking you to save a child, Grace said, the edge in her voice bare. And to let me carry the fight to your IRB instead of telling a father there was nothing left to try. Another pause. Then send the chart. I'll call pharmacy. We'll convene the board by noon. Thank you, Grace whispered, and hung up before the thank you could dissolve into something less composed. She opened her laptop at the nurse's station and began uploading scans, notes, numbers. Every click felt like hammering a plank across a widening gap. Downstairs in a holding room that smelled like old coffee and rubber soles, a detective sat across from the gunman. David Monroe's hands shivered inside his cuffs. He stared at dried blood on the cuff of his sleeve as if it might explain anything. I just wanted to hold his hand, he said, voice raw. Tommy. They told me I was upsetting the unit, told me to leave. The detective's pen hovered. He had heard men lie. He had heard men excuse. This didn't sound like that. This sounded like grief that had nowhere left to go. Through the small window, Hale watched. Not a judge, not a cop. A man who signed contracts and unfroze budgets and once, a very long time ago, had held his own son through an asthma attack and thought the world might rip apart because a small chest couldn't pull air. He closed his eyes. He opened them. He walked away to take another call, this one from fundraising donors, already asking if they needed to message the incident. He told them no. Then he told them yes. Then he hung up and leaned his forehead against cool glass in an empty conference room and stayed that way until the glass warmed to the shape of his worry. By morning, the hospital had returned to its usual choreography, only tighter at the edges. A tray clinked in the ICU hallway. Coffee steamed in paper cups, bitter and life-saving. Sophia brought Lily up in a wheelchair. The ICU nurse at the desk spoke to her in a voice that smoothed every hard thing. You can visit for a minute, honey, he said. 1 minute. We'll make it 2. The room felt bigger with Lily in it, somehow brighter. She rolled to the bed, the wheels whispering. She took Ethan's fingers carefully between both of hers. Hi, Daddy, she said. It's me. No movement answered, just the steady rise and fall of a chest under blankets, the steady beep, the soft hiss. I drew a new butterfly, she said. This one has purple on the wings like the sky when it's almost night. She glanced at Grace, who stood at the foot of the bed, hands folded together like she wasn't sure where to put them. Dr. Grace says you're resting. He's doing what we told him, Grace said, fighting a smile she hadn't felt capable of last night. He's following directions for once. Lily leaned forward until her forehead rested against Ethan's wrist. You can rest, she whispered, but don't be gone long. You promised me pancakes when I feel better. A strangled sound rose in Grace's chest, and she tamped it down to something steadier. She knelt so she and Lily were eye to eye again. Do you want to tell him the secret? What secret? The one about the program, Grace said. I called a friend at the university. We think we can get you into a new treatment. Strong soldiers, the strongest. Lily's mouth formed a surprised O. Will it make me better? That's the plan, Grace said. And I am very bad at losing. Lily nodded solemnly, then turned back to her father. Hear that Daddy Dr. Grace is going to win. The minute stretched to 2. Mateo led it. Rules could bend for hope. When Lily left, she blew a kiss from the doorway. It landed somewhere between the IV pole and the rails, and because the world sometimes cooperates, it landed exactly where it needed to on a man who could not yet receive it, and somehow did anyway. At noon exactly, Grace's phone lit with Dr. Myers' name. She stepped into the hallway. Yes, we have a slot, he said. Board approved. Compassionate protocol extension. We'll need consent, labs, 1,000 pages of signatures. You'll have them. Funding, he asked, pragmatic. Even at cost, this isn't work with me, Grace said. I'll find it. She hung up and walked straight to Hale's office. She didn't knock. He looked up startled, then seeing her face pushed his chair back so quickly it bumped the credenza. The trial is open, she said. We need coverage. Today. He swallowed. He lifted his phone and turned the screen toward her, a text from General Counsel. A PDF icon gleamed. The appellate decision came in at midnight, he said. The insurer's denial is vacated. Full payout due. To Ethan Carter. Today. Grace stared. The skin at the back of her neck prickled. How much? He said the number. For a heartbeat, the hospital fell away. The budget meetings, the billing office, the vending machines, the blood on tile. In Grace's mind, there was only a little girl with a rabbit, a father in a bed, and a door that had been closed for 3 aching years creaking open to light. She nodded once. Then let's move. And in the ICU, as if somewhere deep, his body had heard the sound of a world shifting. Ethan's eyelids trembled. Just once. Just enough to tell the people who loved him that the thread they'd been pulling all night had caught. The ICU window let in a square of weak morning light pale against the stark white sheets that covered Ethan Carter's body. Machines hummed their steady chorus, their beeps, like mechanical heartbeats marking time he couldn't feel. His chest rose and fell under the bandages, each breath labored but present. At the edge of the bed, Lily sat curled in a chair that was too big for her, her rabbit tucked against her ribs, her small hand resting over Ethan's. She had begged to stay longer, and Grace Lynn had quietly bent the rules again. For now, the nurses allowed it. Sometimes the best medicine was presence. Daddy, Lily whispered, leaning close, her forehead brushing his arm. I'm still here. I'm not leaving. You don't leave either, okay? The heart monitor beeped on slow and stubborn. Grace stood at the doorway watching, her eyes burned from sleepless hours. Her scrubs wrinkled, her hair frizzed loose around her face. None of it mattered. What mattered was this father and daughter tethered by touch and willpower, and something stronger than both. She carried a folder pressed to her chest, the appellate decision Hale had forwarded. Inside 3 years of legal battles, signed rulings, embossed seals. Proof that Anna Carter's life insurance had not been swallowed by technicality, but was owed in full $470,000. Grace had flipped through every page twice before bringing it upstairs. She had read the words, then read them again, as if sheer repetition might ensure their permanence. The case was real. The ruling was final. For once, the system had bent toward justice. Now she stood on the threshold, clutching the folder like it was fragile glass. Jonathan Hale appeared beside her, his usual polished calm dented by fatigue. His tie was gone, shirt sleeves rolled to elbows, hair mussed. He looked less like a director and more like a man who hadn't slept, which he hadn't. "Have you told him yet?" Hale asked quietly. Grace shook her head. "He's still unconscious. Then tell him when he wakes. He deserves to hear it first." Hale paused, his gaze moving to Lily. "And make sure she hears it in a way she can carry. Children remember these moments for the rest of their lives." Grace studied him for a beat. She had often thought of Hale as the embodiment of hospital administration calculations and protocols, rules, and budgets. But right now, he spoke like a man who remembered being a father. She nodded. "I'll tell him." Later that morning, when Lily had been coaxed into the lounge for breakfast, Grace pulled a chair to Ethan's bedside. She opened the folder, laid it across her knees, and took his cool hand in both of hers. "You fought hard," she whispered. "Now it's my turn to fight for you." She began to read aloud. Not the dry legal text, not the procedural jargon, but the heart of it, that Anna had not left them empty, that her love had endured in the form of a policy, that the money was theirs enough to clear debts and cover treatment enough to give Lily a real chance. As if in answer, Ethan's eyelids flickered. His chest hitched. Ethan Grace leaned forward, heart thundering. "Can you hear me?" The lids opened slowly. His eyes, glazed and unfocused, roamed before finding hers. He blinked, lips parting. A faint rasp escaped. Lily Grace's breath caught. She squeezed his hand. "She's safe. She's here. She'll be back in a moment. You need to rest." His gaze slid past her, finding the folder. He frowned faintly, confusion in the crease of his brow. Grace lifted it. "News. Good news. Anna's insurance, after all these years, they ruled in your favor. Ethan, it's $470,000. It's yours. It's Lily's." His eyes widened. Tears welled, gathering at the corners. His chest shook with a half sob, half cough. After all this, yes." Grace smiled through her own tears. "After all this." Lily returned moments later, pushing her rabbit against her chest, crumbs of toast still on her lips. When she saw her father's eyes open, she dropped the toy and ran. "Daddy!" She climbed onto the bed, careful of tubes, pressing her small body against his side. "You're awake." Ethan let out a sound that was part laugh, part cry. His arm, heavy and slow, lifted to encircle her. "Princess," he whispered, voice ragged. "You stayed. Of course I stayed." She looked up at him with the fierce certainty only children can manage. "I told you I wouldn't leave." Grace stepped back, her throat tight, giving them space. For a long moment, the ICU faded. The machines, the alarms, the antiseptic air, it all dimmed beside the sight of a girl holding her father as if her arms could anchor him to the world. That afternoon, Hale called an emergency board meeting. The news of the shooting had already leaked. Local outlets reported father shot in hospital incident, leaving details vague. The board convened in a long glass-walled room, each member carrying equal measures of alarm and calculation. Hale stood at the head, his hands on the polished wood. He spoke not as a bureaucrat, but as a witness. "He stepped in front of a gun to protect one of our own," Hale said. "He saved Dr. Lynn's life. His daughter is our patient. His wife was our nurse. This family is tied to us in ways that demand action." A murmur rippled. Numbers were raised, liability cost precedent. Hale silenced them with a single sentence. "What is our mission, if not to save children like Lily Carter?" The room quieted. Slowly, one by one, heads nodded. The vote was unanimous. By evening, the hospital announced it would erase every penny of Ethan Carter's medical debt. More than that, they would place Lily as the first patient in a groundbreaking therapy, combining standard and experimental treatment. Grace carried the news to Ethan herself. She sat at his bedside, her hands folded in her lap, her voice trembling as she spoke. "They voted today. Everything past bills, current treatments, future care, it's gone. Wiped clean. You and Lily owe nothing." Ethan stared, disbelieving. His lips trembled. "Nothing. Nothing. And Lily." She'll start the new protocol immediately. The best medicine we have. Tears broke free, streaming down his temples into his hair. I was ready to watch her die because I couldn't pay, he whispered. I thought love wasn't enough. Grace reached out, placing her hand over his. Love brought you here, and it saved my life. Now it's saving hers too. From the doorway, Lily piped up with the certainty of a child who didn't know what couldn't be done. See, Daddy? I told you Dr. Grace always wins. For the first time in months, Ethan laughed a broken, painful laugh that healed even as it hurt. The ICU quieted into the hush of late evening when the halls seemed to exhale after a day of chaos. The overhead lights dimmed, leaving a softer glow that reflected on glass walls. Nurses moved gently. Their footsteps muffled their voices low so children could sleep. Ethan Carter lay propped slightly on pillows, tubes still tethered to his chest, the steady beep of monitors keeping rhythm with the fragile pulse of his survival. At his side, Lily rested her head against his arm, the stuffed rabbit between them. She had refused to go home. No one had the heart to make her. Across the bed sat Grace Lynn, her posture weary, but her eyes alert. She had promised Lily she would not leave, and she meant it. For a long time they simply existed in that fragile circle, the father, the daughter, the doctor bound together by blood and vows and something larger than all three. Then, as if the air shifted, Ethan stirred, his gaze still cloudy with painkillers, and fatigue drifted to Grace. You stayed. Of course I stayed, she said softly. I wasn't about to let you fight this alone. A faint smile tugged at his lips. That's, usually my line. Grace allowed herself a laugh, a quiet one. Then we'll call it even. He nodded weakly, his chest hitching. Lily. She's right here, Grace assured him, glancing at the child asleep at his side. Safe. Always safe. Ethan's eyes softened, his free hand brushing across his daughter's hair. Good. That's good. Then his gaze shifted back to Grace, heavy with unspoken gratitude. You saved her, and me. Grace shook her head, her throat tightening. You saved me, Ethan. You stepped in front of a gun without a second thought. Don't you dare forget that. His eyes fluttered closed, not from sleep, but from the weight of memory. He had seen the gunman's eyes, the torment there. He had felt the force of the bullet. He remembered Grace's cry, Lily's scream. He remembered thinking, this is the only thing I can do that matters. In a quiet conference room 2 floors below, Jonathan Hale sat alone at a long mahogany table. Papers were spread before him. Financial ledgers, liability assessments, security reports. But his attention was on a single manila folder marked Monroe David. He opened it slowly, scanning the details. David Monroe, age 42. Occupation warehouse supervisor. Son Tommy. Monroe deceased, age 5. Diagnosis acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Treatment terminated after insurance reached lifetime maximum. Hale closed the folder, his chest tight. He had spent years balancing numbers, fighting budgets, telling himself policies were neutral. But this wasn't neutral. This was a father who had buried his child because medicine had a price tag. A father who had stormed into his hospital, pistol in hand, not because he was evil, but because he was broken. Hale rubbed his eyes, his reflection fractured in the glass wall. For the first time in his career, he wondered if everything he had been trained to protect profit margins, liability shields, was worth the cost. Back upstairs, the ICU door opened quietly. A uniformed officer stepped in, hat in hand. He paused when he saw Lily asleep, lowering his voice. Dr. Lynn, sorry to disturb. We need a statement when Mr. Carter is able. About the incident. Grace stood blocking his view of the bed. Not tonight, she said firmly. He nearly died 12 hours ago. He is not your suspect. He is your survivor. The officer nodded, chastened. Understood. Tomorrow, then. When he left, Grace returned to her chair. She caught Ethan's faint smile, one corner of his mouth twitching. You don't take orders well, he rasped. Neither do you, she countered. They shared the ghost of a laugh. In that fragile moment, the heaviness of the hospital lifted, if only slightly. By dawn, Lily stirred, rubbing her eyes, blinking up at her father. Daddy, I'm here, Ethan whispered. His voice was hoarse, his chest raw, but he managed to smile. She reached up her small fingers, brushing his cheek. I dreamed about Mommy. She said you're strong. She said everything will be okay. Ethan swallowed hard, blinking against the sting in his eyes. She's right, Princess. Everything's going to be okay. Grace felt her throat catch. For once, she didn't try to hide it. That morning, a nurse delivered a letter to Grace from the director's office. Inside was the official declaration the hospital board had voted unanimously. All of Ethan and Lily's medical debts erased. All future treatment covered. Grace brought the letter to Ethan's bedside. She read it aloud, each word like a stone dropping into water, sending ripples across his face. He closed his eyes, tears sliding down his temples. I was ready to lose her because I couldn't pay. Not anymore, Grace said firmly. That burden's gone. Lily looked between them wide-eyed. So, I get to finish my medicine. Yes, Grace smiled. You'll finish it, and then some. We're going to give you the best, strongest soldiers we have. Lily grinned through missing baby teeth. Then I'll win. You already have, Ethan whispered. That night when the hospital quieted again, Grace stepped out onto the rooftop terrace reserved for staff. The city stretched below lights, flickering like a million tiny candles. She leaned against the railing, inhaling the sharp winter air, and let the tears she had been holding finally fall. Because in one day, she had nearly lost everything. In one day, a father had almost died to save her. In one day, a hospital had shifted from numbers to humanity. And in one day, hope had been reborn. Morning sunlight spilled across the ICU like a soft blessing, golden through the blinds, warm against the white sterility. Ethan Carter stirred awake to its touch lids, heavy but open. He blinked at the glow, disoriented, then turned his head toward the small weight curled beside him. Lily had fallen asleep in the chair, her rabbit clutched under her chin, a blanket tucked around her shoulders by some kind nurse during the night. The sight of her steady breathing brought tears to Ethan's eyes. He was here. She was here. Against everything, they were still together. The door whispered open and Grace Lynn stepped in her scrubs, freshly changed, but her eyes still lined with fatigue. She carried a clipboard under one arm, but her expression softened when she saw Ethan awake. You scared us, she said, gently, pulling a chair closer. Ethan's voice was hoarse, each word scraped raw. Guess I scared myself too. Grace allowed herself a laugh, soft and shaky. That makes two of us. He turned his gaze to Lily, then back to Grace. How bad her tone was calm, clinical, but her eyes held the weight of truth. The bullet collapsed. Your left lung tore through muscle, nicked your spleen. You lost more than half your blood volume. But you held on. You're still holding. He let the words sink in. Then he whispered, worth it. Grace blinked rapidly, fighting the tears that threatened. You nearly died. You're alive, he countered, and she still has you. The conversation paused as Lily stirred, blinking sleepily. When her eyes found Ethan's open, she gasped and scrambled to his side, her arms wrapping around him as carefully as her small body could manage. Daddy, you're awake. His chest ached, but he held her close, inhaling the sweet, familiar scent of strawberry shampoo. Hey, Princess, told you I'd stick around. Her tears dampened his gown, her voice muffled against his shoulder. I was so scared. I know, he whispered, pressing his lips to her hair. But I'm not going anywhere. Grace turned away slightly, giving them a moment. Yet she stayed close because she too needed to see this reunion to remind herself why they all fought so hard. Later that afternoon, Jonathan Hale arrived at the ICU. He looked different than usual, his jacket, absent tie, loose, the lines of his face deeper than boardrooms ever revealed. He stood by the bed, clearing his throat, shifting awkwardly. Mr. Carter, he began. I wanted to see you personally, to thank you. You saved Dr. Lynn's life, and you reminded all of us what courage looks like. Ethan tried to wave it off, but his arm barely lifted. I just did what anyone would do. Hale shook his head. No, most people wouldn't. You acted when others froze, and because of that, we've made some decisions. Grace glanced up, already knowing. Hale continued. The hospital board met last night. We voted to erase all of your medical debt, every dollar, past, present, and future. Ethan froze, the words too large to process. Erase, yes, Hale said firmly. Gone. Ethan's chest heaved. But how, why? Because you've given more than anyone could ask. Hale answered. His voice softened. And because this system should never break families the way it broke yours. Or David Monroe's. The name cut the air. Ethan swallowed. The gunman Hale nodded slowly. His son died here 7 weeks ago. He couldn't afford treatment after insurance maxed out. He lost everything. Ethan closed his eyes. He saw the man's trembling hands, the tears, the anguish. Not a monster, a father. I could have been him, Ethan whispered. Grace touched his arm. But you weren't. You chose differently, and because of that, everything changes now. That evening, Grace returned with a stack of forms. The university trial accepted Lily. She told him, her voice trembling with the enormity. She's officially enrolled. She'll get the most advanced therapy we have. The strongest soldiers. Lily's eyes widened. Really? Daddy, did you hear I get new soldiers? Ethan let out a broken laugh. I heard, Princess. And they'll win. Just like you. He turned his gaze to Grace, emotion flooding his tired eyes. Thank you for fighting, for keeping her alive, for keeping me alive. Grace squeezed his hand, her voice steady but soft. You saved me first. I'm just returning the favor. That night, when the machines quieted into rhythm and Lily slept again by his side, Ethan stared at the ceiling, thinking of Anna. Did you see this? He whispered into the stillness. Our girl's going to make it, because of you, because of what you left us. His eyes drifted shut, tears warm against his temples. For the first time in months, sleep came without fear. Morning found the ICU washed in a clean, gentle light, the kind that made chrome rails glow and turned the dust motes near the blinds into tiny floating stars. Ethan woke to it by degrees sound first, the soft hiss of oxygen, the spaced-out beeps, then touched Lily's warm palm against the back of his hand, then sight blurred edges resolving into his daughter's face, into the ceiling, into the pale square of winter sky. He'd slept. It didn't feel like victory so much as a truce signed overnight. The pain waited quiet but present. The fear waited too, somewhere beyond the glass wall. But for the first time he believed he might have the strength to greet both. Lily was already awake, chin on the bedrail hair, a little wild rabbit smashed flat between her cheek and the metal. Good morning, Daddy, she whispered like it was a secret. Good morning, Princess. It came out rough. The smile came easier. You still here? Always. Her eyes flicked to the window. I think it's snowing. It wasn't just a passing brightness, but he looked anyway because she wanted him to. Then we'll say it is. The door slid and breathed closed. Dr. Grace Lynn entered with the careful energy of someone holding too much at once clipboard under her arm, a thick folder clutched to her chest, a coffee cup she'd clearly forgotten to drink. Mateo, the ICU nurse, slipped in behind her and checked the monitors, his gaze flicking from numbers to faces with the same quiet attention. How's our favorite troublemaker, Grace asked, setting the coffee on the window ledge. Breathing, Ethan said, complaining internally. Excellent. Your internals can file a formal grievance later. She took the chair. The folder remained in her lap. I brought you something. Lily sat up straighter. A present? In a way. Grace tapped the folder's spine with a forefinger. It's about your mom. The room shifted so subtle a change you could miss it if you didn't live there. Ethan's throat tightened. He stared at the folder as if it might tremble open on its own. You said, yesterday. I did. Her voice softened. But I want to tell you properly, and I want you both to hear it. She opened the folder. Legal language stared back stamps and signatures and words that had tried for 3 long years to keep money away from a family that needed it. Grace translated line by patient line into human. Your wife Anna had a group life policy through this hospital when Lily was born, she said. When Anna went on maternity leave, HR botched a beneficiary update. After the accident, the insurer used that to deny the payout. The hospital's legal team challenged it. Appeals, hearings. And then she tapped a page where a raised seal made a faint circle in the paper. The appellate court ruled the denial invalid. Final. Binding. The funds are owed to you. How much is the owed? Ethan asked, careful like the number might break if he said it too loud. $470,000, Grace said. After legal fees, disbursement will still put the majority under your control. The hospital's social work and finance teams will help structure it. Protect it, really. So Lily's care is secure. He didn't speak for a few seconds. Didn't blink. The number floated above the bed like a sentence in slow motion. For months, every dollar had been a cliff. Every week, a fall. Now a hand had reached out in the dark and caught him mid-plunge. He breathed once, twice. Then the words broke free raw around the edges. "She saved us," he whispered. Even after, Grace said. Lily lifted her head, puzzled and hopeful. Is she behind my soldiers?" Grace's eyes shone. "In a way, yes. She made sure you'd have every soldier you need." Lily nodded, solemn as a judge. "Then we'll win." A knock at the glass. Jonathan Hale stood there, sleeves rolled, a woman beside him in a dark suit with a tidy stack of folders of her own. Hale eased the door open and inclined his head, a formality that seemed left over from a different part of the building. "Mr. Carter?" He said, "This is Linda Park, our general counsel." "May we?" Ethan answered with a small nod. The chest tube tugged when he tried to do anything larger. Grace rose, squeezed his forearm, and remained at the foot of the bed like a guard. Linda set 2 folders on the rolling table, her voice the even, careful kind that made hard things sound navigable. "First, I'm sorry for your loss, and for the years this took. We're here to make 3 things happen quickly and cleanly." She held up one finger. "1, execution of disbursement. Our finance office will cut an immediate bridge payment today while the insurer wires the full amount. 2, a trust vehicle in Lily's name, college contingencies, protections from life. 3, coordination, so none of this interferes with her trial enrollment or your disability paperwork." "Disability?" Ethan blinked. "Short-term," Hale said quickly. "While you recover, payroll can help you file." He shifted, then respected the promise he'd made himself sometime between last night's coffee and this morning's sunrise. "There's more. But one thing at a time." Ethan's eyes flicked to Grace. He felt a little like a man watching professionals build a bridge beneath the wheels of the car he was still riding in. He felt grateful. He felt dizzy. He felt a stab of guilt. Ridiculous, immediate, for thinking of bills at a moment when his daughter's future finally looked like a road instead of a wall. "We'll sign what you need," he said, choking a little on the last word. "I don't want to miss anything." "You won't," Linda said. "We'll go slow." They did. The pen felt too heavy in his shaky fingers. Lily asked what irrevocable meant. Linda explained it meant promises that couldn't be broken. Lily liked that. She said Mommy liked promises that stuck. Everyone in the room pretended they could swallow without difficulty. When the last signature was done, Hale didn't leave. He looked at Ethan with a quiet that seemed new on him. "I can't fix everything that happened in these halls," he said, "but I can promise you this, we are going to do better." Ethan managed a small smile. "Then start by letting my kid keep breaking the rules." He tilted his chin toward Lily, nestled where children weren't technically allowed to be for more than a few minutes. Hale's mouth tipped. "Consider the rule. Revised." They left with their papers, their careful words, their visible resolve. After the door sighed shut, the room felt larger. Maybe it was only the way breath moved more easily in everyone's chest. Grace picked up the coffee she'd forgotten and grimaced as if surprised it had gone cold. "Okay," she said, shaking off a layer of formal air. "My turn to be the paper monster. The trial starts with consent. And blood work. And more consent." "How many pages?" Ethan asked. "Approximately a forest," she said. "But I'll walk you through each tree." They did that too. Grace didn't read at him. She read with him, halting to translate, pausing to let the meaning settle, naming side effects, and what to watch for and when to call at 3 a.m. Always the answer was always. She slid the chart for signature, then drew a silly face in the margin for Lily, who giggled and drew eyelashes on it with a purple marker. "Strongest soldiers," Lily said when they finished. "What are their names?" Grace thought, then grinned. "We can call them whatever you want, but in the lab we call them blasters, because they're very rude to cancer cells." Lily liked that even more. "Blasters it is." In the quiet between paperwork and labs, the officer from the night before returned. He stayed in the doorway this time, hat in hand, uncertainty softening his posture. "Mr. Carter," he said when you're ready. "Not today," Grace said without looking up from the chart. The officer nodded. He wasn't offended. No one got to arrest grief. "I'll come back," he said, and he went. Sophia wheeled in a tray with apple slices and a muffin she swore was doctor-approved. Mateo changed an IV bag like a magician, slick, efficient, already gone before the tape had kissed the line. A phlebotomist with the sticker collection in her pocket drew blood and left Lily with a glitter star on the back of her hand. At midday, when the lab sent numbers and the pharmacist sent a cool, condensed version of hope in clear bags, Grace stood at the foot of the bed and took a breath like a coach before the first game. "All right, Lily," she said. "Enlistment time." Lily squared her shoulders. "Blasters report." She laughed at herself and then grew serious. Her small face arranged into a look Ethan had seen on Anna when she'd had to deliver hard news kindly. What if I feel sick?" "Then we fight that too," Grace said. "We rest, we adjust, we hold the line. And if I'm scared, then you squeeze my hand," Grace said, stepping closer. "And if I'm scared, I'll squeeze yours." Ethan watched them, his daughter, his doctor, and felt something expand behind his ribs that wasn't breath. It was a room he hadn't visited in months. It had light in it. It had a window. He cleared his throat. "Can I make a formal request?" Grace looked over, eyebrow up. "We are very pro-requests. When she's out of the woods," he said, "I owe someone pancakes." Grace's smile went crooked. "You owe two someones, and I accept." Afternoon settled. Snow did begin to drift outside after all, not much, just enough to make the city look like it had remembered how to be quiet. The first infusion started with the soft beep of a pump and a flutter of nerves. Lily watched the bag like a hawk studying a cloud. "Is it working?" she asked 5 minutes in. "Yes," Grace said. "Even when you can't feel it." Ethan squeezed Lily's fingers. She squeezed back. They didn't talk about the man with the gun, not then. But when the door was closed and the nurse had stepped away and the pump made its gentle mechanical breath, Ethan said very low, "I know why he came." Grace didn't pretend not to understand. "I do too. I don't know what the hospital will do with him," he said. "But if anyone asks, tell them I don't want him buried under something he can't climb out of. He already is." Grace's eyes flicked to Lily, then back to Ethan. "I hear you." Evening brought a different team of nurses, different voices, the same steady hands. Hale stopped by only once silent to hand Grace a single-page memo approving a family assistance fund revamp. She read it, nodded, folded it into the folder already thick with other promises. By night, the room glowed again, machines making constellations. The window square dark now, except for a few brave city lights. Lily dozed in fusion, still tracing a slow line into her small arm. Ethan's eyes drifted heavy with a second day of mercy. Grace stood at the glass hands in her coat pockets, watching the reflection of the three of them in the window, a father stitched back together, a child learning the names of new soldiers, a doctor keeping watch because that is what you do when someone has thrown themselves between you and a bullet. She turned back to them and whispered half to herself, "Hold." The monitor answered with its soft, patient reply, "Hold." The following morning dawned, clear sunlight spilling over the city like melted gold streaking the hospital's glass facade. From the ICU window, the world looked almost ordinary commuters, with coffee cups, buses sighing at stops, children in coats tugged along sidewalks. Inside, nothing was ordinary. Inside, Ethan Carter was alive. He woke slowly, blinking against the brightness. His chest ached with every breath. But it was a clean ache now, not the suffocating heaviness of yesterday. He turned his head to the right. Lily sat at his side with a clipboard on her lap, tongue poking from the corner of her mouth as she sketched butterflies with shaky purple lines. Her stuffed rabbit lay sprawled across the blanket beside him, its fabric ear tucked under his hand like a second tether to this world. "Morning, Daddy," she whispered when she noticed his eyes open. "Morning, Princess." His voice was hoarse but stronger. "What's the verdict?" She held up the drawing. a butterfly with lopsided wings, each filled with bright swirls of color. This one's for the soldiers, so they know what they're fighting for. Ethan swallowed hard, the paper blurring. It's perfect. The room filled gradually with the rhythm of a new day. Nurses in fresh scrubs switched IV bags, checked vitals, scribbled on charts. Mateo, still on shift, leaned in with his easy humor. Pressures holding steady lungs sound better. You're making our jobs too easy, Carter. Ethan managed a crooked smile. About time I was good at something. Grace Lynn swept in soon after, carrying a stack of files and a small tray. She set the tray on the rolling table with a little flourish. Breakfast of champions, she declared. Broth juice, and she lifted the cover, a pancake. Half, doctor's orders. Lily clapped. Pancakes. Ethan chuckled, wincing at the tug in his chest. I did promise. You'll get the full stack once your spleen stops being so dramatic, Grace teased. Then her expression softened as she set down the files. We also have updates. Her tone carried weight. Ethan's smile faltered. Good or bad? Good, she assured quickly. She tapped the top folder. Your enrollment in the university trial is finalized. First infusion for Lily went well. Labs look stable. She tolerated it beautifully. Ethan looked at his daughter, pride and fear warring inside him. How do you feel? Princess Lily shrugged. A little tired. But okay, I think the blasters are working already. Grace grinned. That's exactly what we like to hear. Later, when Lily was wheeled down the hall for scans, Grace pulled her chair close to Ethan. Her voice dropped. There's something else. He braced himself, chest tightening. The board didn't just erase your debt, she said. They voted to do more. They want to establish a foundation in Anna's name. Ethan blinked. Anna? Yes. The Anna Carter Foundation for Pediatric Oncology Families. Its mission to ensure no parent ever has to choose between treatment and bankruptcy again. Grace's eyes glistened. They're starting it with $2 million from hospital leadership alone. Donations are already coming in from staff board members, even community partners. And you and Lily will be its face. Ethan's breath caught. For a moment he couldn't speak. Anna, she'd have wanted that. She always said. He trailed off, his voice breaking. Grace touched his hand. She still gets to save children, Ethan. Through you. Through Lily. Through every family this foundation touches. Tears slid down his temples. He turned his head toward the ceiling, whispering, You're still here, Anna, still fighting. By afternoon, news had spread beyond the hospital walls. Local outlets carried headlines. Single father shields doctor from gunfire hospital. Responds with major policy change. Reporters clustered outside microphones and cameras waiting for comment. Hale's PR team drafted cautious statements, but no one missed the shift in tone. Inside, the staff buzzed with renewed purpose. Nurses who had worked double shifts for years found themselves smiling again. Parents in waiting rooms whispered about the new foundation, hope kindling in their tired eyes. And through it all, Ethan lay in his bed, still weak, but watching a ripple he hadn't expected, his one act of reckless sacrifice spreading outward like a stone dropped in water. That evening, Grace returned with a new visitor. Jonathan Hale stepped into the room, his usual stiffness tempered. He carried a small envelope in one hand. Mr. Carter. He began, clearing his throat. I thought it best you hear this directly. He handed the envelope over. Ethan fumbled to open it with his shaking hands. Inside was a typed letter bearing the hospital's seal. He read slowly, lips moving over each word. Effective immediately, the Anna Carter Foundation will cover the full cost of Lily Carter's ongoing treatment and provide financial support for families in similar circumstances. In recognition of your extraordinary bravery, your family will be the first beneficiaries. At the bottom, every board member's signature sprawled in ink. Ethan stared at it, overwhelmed. His throat closed, his eyes blurred. Why, he whispered hoarsely. Why us, Hale's voice softened. Because you showed us what it means to fight when you have nothing left. Because this hospital can't afford to look away anymore. And because sometimes one man's sacrifice can change the course for hundreds. Ethan swallowed, nodding faintly. Then let's make it worth it. That night, Lily curled in the bed beside him, her small body tucked carefully against his bandaged chest. Grace watched them from the doorway, a quiet smile on her face. The machines hummed. The city lights twinkled beyond the window. And for the first time in too long, Ethan let himself believe in tomorrow. Not just for him, but for every family who would walk these halls and find doors open where once they had been closed. Snowflakes drifted outside the ICU window the next morning, thin and hesitant at first, then steadier, dusting the city in quiet white. Ethan Carter watched them through the glass, his breath catching with each ache of his chest. The world beyond felt distant, like a memory he might return to if he just held on long enough. Beside him, Lily pressed her palm against the glass, eyes wide. "Daddy, it's really snowing. Not pretend snow this time." He smiled weakly. "Then it's official. Winter's here." She turned her face glowing despite her pale cheeks. "When I get better, can we build a snowman?" His throat tightened. "Yes, Princess, we'll build the biggest one on the block." Grace Lynn entered just then, her cheeks flushed from the cold outside, a clipboard tucked under one arm, a scarf draped hastily around her shoulders. She paused at the sight of Lily, at the window, Ethan watching her like she was the only thing in the room. "You'll have to keep your promise," Grace said softly. "She'll remember." "I know," Ethan replied, voice cracking. "I want her to." The day unfolded in fragments, blood draws, vitals, nurses moving quietly around the room, Lily curled with her coloring book, sketching butterflies with scarves around their necks. Ethan watched her, his body weak, but his spirit clinging stubbornly to every second. At noon, Jonathan Hale returned. His suit jacket was gone again, sleeves rolled a stack of papers under his arm. He set them gently on the table. "We filed the paperwork for the Anna Carter Foundation," he explained. "It will be announced publicly tomorrow. Donations are already pledging staff, board members, even strangers from the community. You've started something larger than yourself, Mr. Carter." Ethan shook his head faintly. "I didn't start anything. I just couldn't stand by." "You acted when others wouldn't," Hale said firmly. "That's the spark. Now the rest of us have no excuse." Grace glanced at Ethan, her expression soft but fierce. "Anna's name is going to save more children than we'll ever count." Ethan closed his eyes, whispering, "She deserves that." Later that afternoon, Lily was wheeled down for her next infusion. Grace stayed at Ethan's bedside, reviewing charts, keeping vigil. Ethan broke the silence. "You said yesterday about Monroe, the man with the gun, his son." Grace's face tightened. "Acute leukemia, same diagnosis as Lily. They ran out of coverage. The hospital turned them away when payments stopped. Tommy died 7 weeks ago." Ethan swallowed the weight of the truth pressing hard. "I saw it in his face. He wasn't crazy, just broken." Grace nodded. "Exactly. Don't let them bury him under bars," Ethan whispered. "He doesn't need punishment. He needs help." Her voice was quiet but steady. "I'll speak for him. You're not the only one who sees the truth." By evening, the ICU felt less like a prison of machines and more like a sanctuary. A nurse hung string lights along the window at Lily's request, their soft glow chasing away the harsh sterility. Lily returned from infusion and snuggled against her father, pointing at the lights. "They look like stars," she murmured. Ethan kissed her hair. "Then let's make a wish." They both closed their eyes. Silence fell except for the hum of machines. Grace watched them from her chair, a lump in her throat. She thought of all the parents she'd seen walk these halls, all the losses, all the bills that had stolen time as surely as any disease. She thought of Ethan taking a bullet to shield her, of Lily's fragile but unyielding hope of Anna's insurance finally breaking through after years of cruelty. She thought, this is what it means to fight for life. Not just to keep a heart beating, but to give it room to hope again. That night after Lily had drifted into sleep and Ethan dozed lightly, Grace stepped out into the hall. Jonathan Hale waited by the nurse's station, a phone pressed to his ear. He ended the call when he saw her. "Press wants a statement tomorrow," he said. "They'll push for details. Then give them this." Grace replied, her voice steel. "Tell them we failed families like Ethan's and Monroe's, but we're changing that now. Tell them Anna Carter's name will mean no more children are lost for lack of money." Hale studied her, something like admiration flickering in his tired eyes. "You'd make a hell of a director yourself, Dr. Lynn." Grace shook her head. "I just want to save children. Then maybe that's exactly why you should." Back inside, Ethan stirred awake. He found Lily's hand still tucked in his, the lights twinkling above them, the machines keeping rhythm with his heartbeat. For the first time in a long time, he didn't fear the night. He closed his eyes, whispering a promise into the dark. "We'll build that snowman, Princess. I swear it." And this time, he believed it. Morning settled on the hospital like a white sheet, cool clean, a little too bright. Snow held to the branches outside, sugar dust on bare limbs, the street below muffled and slow. Inside the ICU, the world kept time by beeps and soft shoe squeaks and the thin rattle of IV bags swaying when someone passed too close. Ethan Carter woke with the kind of start that comes from dreaming. You've dropped something and then realizing your hands are already holding it. Lily's fingers were there, small and warm in his palm. Grace Lynn's voice drifted from the doorway, low, paired with a deeper one he didn't recognize. Detective Harper, square shoulders in a suit that had seen too many long nights. A notebook, a look he tried to keep neutral and failed. "Mr. Carter," he said gentler than his frame suggested. "I'm sorry to trouble you. We'll keep it short." Ethan nodded. The chest tube tugged, reminding him. "It's fine." Grace stayed. Mateo lingered just beyond the glass, a silhouette of watchfulness. Harper took a chair, set his notebook on his knee, and the room folded into a different kind of quiet. Legal quiet, precise, the kind that shapes outcomes. "We've taken a statement from the ER staff," Harper began. "Security. Dr. Lynn. We need yours. Anything you remember about the moments before the shot." Ethan glanced at Lily. She was coloring tongue between teeth, rabbit perched on her lap like a plush foreman supervising art. He looked back at Harper. He wasn't a monster, Ethan said, before the detective could ask. He was ruined. Harper's pen hesitated. David Monroe. Ethan nodded. He kept saying he just wanted to see his boy, Tommy. He said the hospital wouldn't let him. He wasn't aiming to kill a stranger. He was aiming at the thing that took his son, and the weapon aimed at Dr. Lynn Harper's tone stayed even. Ethan's throat tightened. He was pointing at anyone in a white coat, at what the white coat meant to him. He paused, blinked. He saw the system. Grace happened to be standing there. Grace looked at the floor. The fluorescent lights threw a thin shimmer across her dark hair. She didn't speak. Harper wrote, "Do you wish to seek charges?" Ethan blinked. The question stunned him with its bluntness. "Isn't that your job?" "It is," Harper said. "But victims get a voice." Ethan's eyes slid to Lily. She drew a purple wing, slow and careful, then blew on the paper because maybe that helps ink dry. He looked back at Harper. "I want him to see his son's name somewhere that isn't a headstone," he said. "I want him to do something that stops the next David Monroe from picking up a gun. If prison does that, fine. But if there's another way..." Harper's pen hovered the point, leaving a bright dot in the page. "You're asking for leniency. I'm asking for mercy that looks like work," Ethan said. "Counseling, service, something that lets him stand in front of other fathers and say, 'Don't go where I went.'" Harper nodded, a slow, measured dip, not a promise, but a respect. "I'll pass your request to the ADA." Grace exhaled like she'd been holding the breath since the door opened. "Thank you," she said to Harper. She meant it. Harper closed his notebook. "We'll follow up," he said and stood. Before he left, he glanced at Lily's paper. "That's a good-looking butterfly," he said, and his face did something softer, quick. "My daughter draws horses. Badly." Lily grinned. "I can teach her butterflies." "I'll take you up on that," he said, and the door clicked behind him. For a while, they just listened to the machines resume ownership of the room. A heater kicked on somewhere, a low hum like an old refrigerator trying its best. Snow tapped the window in airy half-moons. Ethan wet his lips. "How did he get this far?" Grace said. Then, because he deserved more than poetry, she added, "a lapse." A door wedged open with a medcart long enough to push through. A failing system that taught him to see hospitals as gates with price tags. Ethan stared at the ceiling. The acoustical tiles made a grid like paper waiting for a list. He imagined writing "sell truck," "sell tools," "sell ring," "sell sleep." He imagined the last line, "sell blood." You couldn't sell enough of it. He had tried anyway. "I feel like I know him," he said. "Like if one call last week had gone differently, that could have been me." Grace's chair creaked when she shifted closer. I know, she said quietly. Me too. He looked surprised.
She smiled without showing teeth. Not the gun, but the braking. The moment when everything you push against stops moving and you think the only way through is something you won't recognize yourself after. Ethan nodded. He had lived on the edge of that cliff for months. He had peered over. He had pulled himself back by Lily's small hand and something older than language. A soft tap at the glass. Jonathan Hale holding 2 paper cups. He stepped in, handed one to Ethan broth the color of tea, one to Grace actual coffee this time. He hovered awkward, then settled his weight into a stance of someone determined to be useful. The ADA is coming by, he said, wants to take your statement formally while you're here. I told them it'll be on your schedule, not theirs. Ethan raised the cup in something like thanks. I already told the detective, he said. Hale nodded. This will be more procedural, and I asked if they'd consider a restorative track.
They didn't say no. Grace looked at him. You asked? Hale shrugged like maybe good deeds fit him uncomfortably, but he was trying them on for size. We're changing policy in one wing, he said. Might as well try changing it in 2. He left. The room kept breathing. An hour later, Assistant District Attorney Mara Valdez arrived with a legal pad and a voice like velvet wrapped over steel. She apologized to Lily for the intrusion, admired the rabbit, and took a seat facing Ethan with the body language of a person whose job required hearing people at their worst and believing them anyway. I'm here to listen, she said simply. Tell me what you need me to know. Ethan told her. Not about the angle of the gun or the precise seconds between shout and shot, the detective had that. He told her about the man's eyes, the way grief had dried them into something too brittle to cry. He told her about Tommy's name and the way it had landed in the air like a bird that didn't know where to land. I'm not asking you to pretend it wasn't violent, Ethan said. It was. People could have died, but if there's room in your world for paths that don't end at bars, I'm asking you to put him on one. Valdez's pen moved. Her gaze stayed on him. Would you be willing to write a statement to that effect? I'll write it, he said. I'll read it if you want. She nodded. And if the court allows, would you participate in a victim impact conference? Grace's head turned. With him. With David. It's optional, Valdez said. Sometimes it's healing. For both. Ethan thought about the chapel downstairs, the ghost of his own whispered, please. He thought about the way the bullet had felt heat pressure, then nothing. The nothing had scared him more. I'll do it, he said. If it helps? Valdez stood. Thank you, she said, and he believed she meant it. At the door, she paused. His wife left, she added quietly. She couldn't stand the hospital after the boy. He's alone. Men alone do foolish things. Men afraid do foolish things, Grace said. Alone makes it worse. Valdez held Grace's gaze a heartbeat longer than usual, as if memorizing an ally. Then she was gone. Evening curled its fingers around the building. The ICU lights softened. Lily's infusion pump purred a soft metronome while she slept rabbit wedged beneath her chin like a second pillow. The call came after visiting hours. Hale answered in his office, the room lit only by a banker's lamp, and the looping screensaver he kept forgetting to change. Yes. On the other end, a public defender with a voice like sandpaper. David Monroe wanted to speak with the doctor, not to argue, not to justify, to apologize. He'd heard the father lived. He wanted to look at the person he'd aimed at and say words his mouth hadn't remembered in months. Hale hesitated. Lawyers, liability optics. Ghosts lined the walls of his mind. Then he remembered blood on tile and a little girl with a glitter sticker on the back of her hand. Supervised, he said. Short. No press. If Dr. Lynn consents. Grace did. Not alone. In a small consult room on the administrative floor where the HVACs rattled and the coffee tasted like yesterday, 2 security officers stood against the wall, hands folded. Harper watched from the corner, arms crossed. David Monroe sat in a chair that made his big frame look folded wrong. His hands cuffed his eyes the color of storm water. He stood when Grace entered. The cuffs dragged a little chain sound that made her chest ache. I don't know how to... he began, then stopped. He looked smaller than he had in the hallway. The hatred was gone.
Only the ruin remained. "I'm sorry," he said, and the words came out as if his throat had to remember how to open for them. "I'm so sorry. I wanted to hurt the thing that took him."
I picked the wrong thing.
Grace kept her voice even. "You wanted someone to feel what you felt," she said, "so the world would know it was real." He nodded. His jaw worked. "I held him," he whispered, "for days after. And then they took him. There weren't any more forms to sign, just nothing. I didn't know where to put my hands after that." Silence took a chair. Everyone let it sit. "You don't need my forgiveness to deserve help," Grace said. "But I'll tell you this. He lived. Ethan, the father you shot. He lived, and he told us to ask for mercy for you." David's head snapped up. Disbelief flared, then something like shame. "Why?" "Because he knows where you were standing when you pulled the trigger," Grace said. "He's been standing near it for months." The man's shoulders shook. For a moment he looked like he might fall apart. Then he didn't. He stood there holding what he had left and nodded. "Tell him—" His voice failed. He swallowed, tried again. "Tell him I'm sorry is too small, but it's all I've got." Grace inclined her head. "I will." Harper cleared his throat, thanks and boundaries in a single sound. The officers moved. The chain made its small weather of iron noise again. The door buzzed. David was led away. Grace stood for a second after they left, hands on the back of the empty chair. She could still feel the room holding its breath. She exhaled for it. Downstairs, she found Ethan awake. She didn't tell him all of it, only the part that would fit in the small pocket of energy he had left. "He apologized," she said. "He asked me to tell you." Ethan stared at the ceiling, eyes shining. "Tell him I want Tommy's name on something that lives," he said. "A bench, a garden, a scholarship, something kids can touch." Grace's throat burned. "Okay." "And Grace," she looked at him. "Make sure it's near Anna's," he said, a ghost of a smile, "so they can keep watch together." She nodded, not trusting her voice. Outside the window, the city's lights came on in layered constellations. Apartment windows, traffic signals, the winking red of a plane so high up it seemed to hang still. The snow had stopped. The dark made the world look like it had taken a breath and held it. In the morning, the board would unveil a podium and a banner and a new account number with a name stitched to it that meant promise. Press would gather, nurses would cry, parents would lift their heads. But tonight the change happened in smaller rooms. In one, a father lay stitched back together asking for mercy for the man who broke him. In another, a man walked away in cuffs with a new word rattling around his ribs like a seed. Hope. Grace took Lily's chart from the foot of the bed and wrote a note that wasn't strictly medical blasters tolerated. Spirits high. She set the pen down, then picked it up again and added, "Next of kin, all of us." She turned off the overhead light and left the lamp by the window on. It painted the room in soft gold, turned the IV pole into a little tower, made the butterfly drawing look like it might lift from the paper if anyone breathed too hard. "Hold," she whispered, out of habit now, out of faith. The monitor kept answering, steady, stubborn, the sound of a life insisting on more. Morning broke crisp and blue, the kind of winter morning that made every rooftop sparkle with frost. The hospital, however, buzzed with a different kind of brightness anticipation. The Anna Carter Foundation would be announced at noon, and already reporters gathered outside their cameras, catching steam from their own breath as they waited in the cold. Inside the ICU, Ethan Carter stirred awake to the faint rumble of voices and movement in the hall. His chest hurt less today, though every breath still reminded him of the scar stitching him back together. Lily was beside him again, coloring on her clipboard, her stuffed rabbit perched on the blanket like a guardian. "Daddy," she said without looking up. "I'm making a picture for Mommy. Do you think she can see it?" Ethan's throat tightened. "I think she sees everything, Princess. Then I'm drawing butterflies so she knows the soldiers are winning." Grace Lynn entered just then, balancing a laptop and a folder under one arm, her other hand carrying 2 cups, coffee for herself, apple juice for Lily. She smiled at the sight of them. Butterflies again. "You're going to have a whole garden before this is over. That's the plan," Lily said solemnly. Grace set the juice down and turned to Ethan. "Big day today. The board wants you there when they announce the foundation." Ethan blinked. "Me, I can barely walk." "We'll get you there," Grace said. Wheelchair monitors, whatever it takes. This is your story as much as Anna's. He let the words settle, both humbled and daunted. She'd laugh if she saw me at a podium. She'd be proud, Grace countered.
Late that morning, hospital staff crowded into the main auditorium. Nurses in scrubs, administrators in suits, parents with tired eyes. Cameras lined the back lenses, glittering under stage lights. At the front stood Jonathan Hale, posture formal, but his expression softer than usual. Beside him, a podium draped with a banner, the Anna Carter Foundation for Families for Futures. Ethan was wheeled in by Mateo Lilly, perched carefully on his lap. Grace walked at their side, her presence steadying. The room quieted as they entered. All eyes followed them down the aisle. Hale stepped to the microphone. We are here today because one man chose courage in the face of despair, because one family bore a weight no one should bear, and because one name, Anna Carter, deserves to mean hope for every parent who walks these halls. Applause rippled through the room. Ethan lowered his eyes, overwhelmed. Hale continued, his voice resonant. The Anna Carter Foundation begins today with $2 million pledged from our leadership. Its mission to ensure that no child is denied treatment because of money. To give every parent what they deserve, time, care, and hope. He gestured to Ethan. And now the man whose sacrifice showed us the way, Ethan Carter. Ethan gripped the podium with trembling hands as Mateo steadied the wheelchair. The microphone loomed too close, the crowd a blur of faces. Lily squeezed his hand, her small fingers anchoring him. He took a breath that hurt, but spoke anyway. I'm not a hero. I'm just a dad who wanted to keep his little girl alive. I stepped in front of a bullet because I couldn't lose the doctor who was fighting for her when no one else would. I would do it again. His voice cracked. He paused, letting silence stretch until he could breathe through it. But this isn't just about me or about Lily. This is about every parent who's been told the same thing I was told, come back when you have the money. This foundation means no one else has to hear that. He looked at Lily, then at the banner. My wife Anna believed every child deserved a chance. Now her name will make sure they get one. That's the only legacy that matters. Applause thundered loud enough to rattle the walls. Tears streaked faces across the room. Lily leaned into the microphone shyly. Thank you for helping my mommy's name save other kids. The room erupted again. Later, as the crowd dispersed and reporters called out questions, Hale approached Ethan quietly. You changed us today, more than any policy ever could. Ethan shook his head. Anna did. Grace, standing nearby, added softly. And Lily. Lily beamed, and Daddy too. That evening back in the ICU, Ethan lay exhausted but lighter than he had felt in months. Lily curled at his side, humming softly to herself. Grace sat in the chair, laptop closed, just watching them. You looked like you belonged up there, she said. I looked like a man trying not to fall out of a wheelchair, Ethan replied, smiling faintly. Grace's eyes softened. You look like a man carrying hope. He glanced at Lily, then back at Grace. That's all I ever wanted. The machines hummed steady, the string lights along the window twinkled, and for the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like a cliff. It felt like a road. The hospital settled into a different rhythm after the Foundation's announcement. What had once been hallways of quiet despair now buzzed with something lighter. Hope whispered between parents, nurses walking a little taller. Even the scent of coffee in the lounge seeming less bitter. Donations poured in. Ethan heard whispers of phones ringing nonstop in Hale's office, checks arriving by courier emails filled with promises. But for Ethan, the change was closer, more fragile. It lived in the way Lily's cheeks flushed pink again, the way her hair began to grow back in tufts that caught the sunlight, the way her laughter sometimes spilled out suddenly like it had been hiding, waiting for permission. He sat propped in bed, bandages still snug around his chest, watching her line up crayons in neat rows. Grace entered quietly, her stethoscope looped around her neck, a clipboard tucked under her arm. She paused in the doorway, smiling at the sight. Your soldiers seem busy, Lily, she said. They're winning, Lily replied seriously. The blasters are really strong. Grace nodded, setting the clipboard down. I've got the labs to prove it. Your counts are improving faster than expected. Ethan let out a shaky breath. Faster. Much faster. Grace confirmed, her smile widening. If this keeps up, we'll be talking about remission sooner than we thought. The word hit Ethan like sunlight through storm clouds. Remission. He closed his eyes, his hand covering his face as tears spilled anyway. Daddy, Lily's small voice piped up worried. He dropped his hand quickly, forcing a smile through the tears. Happy tears, Princess. Just happy. Later that day, Detective Harper returned. His steps were quieter than before, his presence gentler. He carried no notebook this time, only a message. The DA's office reviewed your request, he told Ethan. They're considering an alternative sentence for David Monroe Counseling Service Restorative Justice. Nothing's final, but your voice carried weight. Ethan nodded, relief washing through him. Good. He doesn't need prison. He needs a purpose. Harper hesitated, then added, he asked if he could meet you someday. Only if you wanted it. Ethan thought of Tommy, of the man's shattered eyes, of how close he himself had come to the same edge. Someday, he said quietly, when Lily's better. When I'm strong enough to carry that conversation. That's fair, Harper said, and left him with a nod of respect. Grace, who had been listening, touched Ethan's arm. That was merciful. No, Ethan whispered. It was necessary, for both of us. By evening, the hospital chapel filled with people. Nurses in fresh scrubs, parents clutching photographs, board members with solemn faces. At the front, a new plaque gleamed, the Anna Carter Foundation, dedicated to every family who should never have to choose between money and a child's life. Hale stood at the lectern, but his voice trembled when he spoke. This isn't just policy. This is personal. Anna Carter gave her life to helping children here. Her husband risked his to protect one of our own. Today we honor them by ensuring no parent ever faces what they did. Grace stood with Ethan in a wheelchair, Lily perched proudly on his lap. The chapel's stained glass windows threw colors across them like blessings. Ethan stared at Anna's name etched into bronze, his throat thick, his chest aching not from the wound, but from the love that still lingered. Anna, he whispered under his breath, you're still saving lives. Lily squeezed his hand. I think Mommy heard that, Daddy. Later, in the quiet of his room, Ethan found himself alone with Grace for the first time all day. She sat across from him, her posture slumped in rare exhaustion, her eyes reflecting both relief and sorrow. You know, he said softly, you're part of this family now, whether you like it or not. Her eyes widened, then softened, glistening. I've been fighting for Lily so long, Ethan, she already feels like mine too. He smiled faintly. Then we'll share her. Grace laughed quietly, shaking her head. She's got enough stubbornness for two parents anyway. Their laughter faded into silence, comfortable and full. That night, as Lily slept curled against his side, Ethan stared at the ceiling, whispering to the darkness. Thank you, he said to Anna, to Grace, to whatever force had carried him through, for another chance, for her future. And outside, the snow fell again, quiet and steady, covering the city in white, a reminder that sometimes even the heaviest storms give way to peace. The days that followed unfolded like a slow sunrise, light creeping back into places that had been dark for far too long. Ethan Carter remained in the ICU, though each morning he sat taller, each breath a little less ragged. The bullet wound still burned when he moved wrong, the scar raw beneath the bandages, but he welcomed the pain. It meant he was alive and Lily still had her father. Lily's energy grew too. Her cheeks pinked, her eyes sparkled. Her laugh burst out unexpectedly during coloring sessions with Grace or silly jokes from Mateo the nurse. Her hair, once falling out in soft handfuls, now sprouted in downy tufts. Grace checked her labs each day, and each day the news carried more brightness. The blasters are doing their job, Grace said one morning, showing Ethan the numbers. Her counts are climbing faster than expected. Ethan exhaled, staring at the chart like it was a miracle etched in ink. You're saying she might... Grace finished for him, her voice steady but filled with awe. She might reach remission sooner than anyone dared hope. Ethan pressed a hand over his eyes, overwhelmed. Lily tugged at his sleeve. See, Daddy? I told you I'd win. Word of the Carter story spread far beyond the hospital. Local news stations ran segments daily. Single dad shields, doctor saves lives. Donations surged. Letters poured in, parents writing about children they had lost, families thanking Ethan for giving them hope, strangers sending drawings, prayers, even small checks. The hospital cafeteria bulletin board filled with cards addressed to Lily the Brave and Ethan the Strong. Nurses stopped by the ICU just to say hello to tell Ethan he was the reason they still believed in what they did. Hale stood at the center of it all, fielding calls from national outlets, donors, lawmakers. He had never looked so tired or so determined. At night alone in his office, he stared at the bronze plaque for the Anna Carter Foundation and whispered promises to the woman whose name now guided everything. One afternoon, Detective Harper returned with news. He entered quietly, hat in hand, his voice low. David Monroe pled guilty to weapons charges. The DA is recommending community service mandatory counseling and work with the foundation instead of prison. Your statement carried weight, Mr. Carter. Ethan let out a long breath, a knot in his chest easing. Good. He doesn't need bars, he needs purpose. Harper nodded. He'll be speaking with families, telling his story, trying to make sure no one else follows his path. Lily, listening from her chair, tilted her head. That means Tommy's daddy gets to help other kids. Yes, Ethan said softly. That's exactly what it means. Grace touched Ethan's arm, her eyes bright. You gave him mercy, and you gave his son's name life again. A week later, Ethan was strong enough to move from ICU to a recovery room. The walls weren't glass anymore, the machines less intrusive. Lily curled on the bed beside him, coloring in brighter, bolder shades. Grace still visited daily, sometimes staying late into the evening, sharing stories that made Lily giggle and Ethan feel for a moment like life was normal. One night, when Lily finally drifted to sleep, Ethan spoke quietly. Grace, you saved us. More than once. She shook her head. You saved me first. His gaze softened. Still, if Anna were here, she'd say thank you for carrying what I couldn't. Grace swallowed hard, blinking back tears. I'd tell her it was an honor. Silence stretched, filled with the steady sound of Lily's breathing. In that quiet, something shifted, grief easing, replaced by a fragile but growing sense of peace. Meanwhile, preparations for the Foundation's first fundraiser began. Flyers printed, calls made, volunteers lined up. The hospital auditorium would host hundreds with Ethan and Lily as guests of honor. Ethan protested, I'm not a speaker. I barely made it through the last one. You don't need to be polished, Grace told him. You just need to be real. People don't want perfection. They want truth. And you've lived it. Lily chimed in, grinning. You can tell them about the pancakes? Ethan laughed until it hurt. Maybe I will. That night, as snow fell again outside the window, Ethan lay awake. Lily slept soundly against his arm. Grace had gone home for once, urged by Mateo to rest. Ethan stared at the ceiling, whispering to the empty air. Anna, I hope you see this. Our girl's fighting. She's winning. And your name is going to save so many others. His eyes closed, tears slipping down his cheeks. For the first time in years, he slept without nightmares. The day of the Foundation's first fundraiser arrived like the overture to something larger than any one person. The hospital auditorium had been transformed overnight. Banners draped in Anna Carter's name, photographs of smiling children lined along easels, tables stacked with programs and pledge cards. Volunteers bustled, donors mingled, and cameras flashed beneath the soft shimmer of stage lights. In a private room nearby, Ethan Carter sat in a wheelchair, tugging at the collar of his borrowed suit jacket. The fabric felt stiff against the healing wound beneath his shirt. He glanced at Lily, who twirled in a simple white dress, her hair just long enough to catch a bow. She looked like sunlight reborn. Daddy, do I look like Mommy used to? She asked suddenly, her eyes wide, her voice shy. Ethan's breath caught. He reached out, pulling her close. Exactly like her. Beautiful, brave. Grace entered, clipboard in hand, her usual scrubs traded for a modest dress under a white coat she refused to shed. Ready? She asked gently. No, Ethan admitted, his voice dry. But I'll do it anyway. That's courage, Grace said, smiling. The auditorium quieted as Jonathan Hale stepped to the podium. His voice carried a new gravity. We are gathered to honor Anna Carter's legacy, but also to celebrate the living proof of what sacrifice can achieve. Tonight we stand with Ethan and Lily Carter. Applause thundered, echoing off the walls. Ethan was wheeled forward, Lily walking proudly beside him, her small hand gripping his. The cameras captured everything: his pale but determined face, her glowing smile, the way they looked at each other as if the whole world narrowed to just them. Ethan gripped the podium. The room swam with faces expectant and silent. He cleared his throat, feeling every beat of his heart, every ache of his healing chest. "I'm not a public speaker," he began. "I'm just a father. A father who almost lost his little girl because of money. A father who stood in front of a gun because I couldn't bear to see the one person who was fighting for her fall." The room stilled. Ethan's voice cracked, but he pressed on. "I thought love wasn't enough. But love saved us. It saved me. It saved Lily. And now, because of all of you, it will save countless others." He looked at Lily, who beamed at him, then turned back to the crowd. "Anna's name lives on in this foundation. Her hands healed children once. Now her name will heal many more. That's the legacy she deserves." Tears glistened in eyes across the room. Applause erupted, rising to a standing ovation. After the speeches, donors lined up to pledge. The numbers climbed: 500,000, a million, 2 million more. Grace stood off stage, watching with a hand pressed against her chest. She had fought so long in shadows, arguing with insurers, filling out endless forms. Tonight felt like sunlight breaking through. Hale approached her quietly. "We've already surpassed our goal. This will change everything." Grace nodded, her eyes fixed on Ethan and Lily, greeting strangers, shaking hands, accepting embraces. "It already has." When the evening ended, Ethan wheeled out with Lily asleep on his lap, her head against his chest, her rabbit dangling from her hand. Grace walked beside him, steadying the chair over uneven tiles. "She didn't even make it to dessert," Ethan whispered, smiling. "She didn't need to," Grace said softly. "She already got everything she wanted: her father alive, her future safe." They paused at the elevator. The night outside was quiet, the snow reflecting the city's lights. Ethan glanced at Grace. "You know, I couldn't have carried this without you." Her eyes shone. "You weren't meant to carry it alone." Back in their room, Ethan laid Lily gently on the bed, covering her with a blanket. He lingered, watching her chest rise and fall, her face peaceful. Then he turned to the window, to the stars glittering above the snowy city. His voice was low, steady. "Anna, did you see your name lit up a room tonight? Our little girl danced. She's winning, and I'm still here." He pressed his forehead to the glass, eyes closed, a single tear slipping free. Grace, standing behind him, whispered, "She saw." "I'm sure she did." And in the quiet of that winter night, with hope alive in every corner of the hospital, Ethan Carter believed it too. Spring came slowly to the city, melting the snowbanks, turning gray sidewalks into rivers of water that glittered under street lamps. By then, Ethan Carter was walking again, slow, careful steps, his hand sometimes gripping the rail, but upright. His lungs still ached on cold mornings, the scar on his chest ached in damp weather, yet every step felt like proof he had survived. Lily thrived. Her hair grew thick and golden, curling at the ends, her cheeks plump. Again, her laugh returning in bursts that echoed down hospital hallways. Scans showed what Grace had dared to hope: complete remission. The word itself seemed like sunlight. Ethan had whispered it to himself at night, as if saying it often enough could keep it true. One afternoon, Grace entered their room with a smile brighter than the spring sky. "The results are official. She's clear." Ethan froze. He looked at Lily, then back at Grace, his throat closing. "Clear, clear." Grace repeated, her voice breaking into laughter through tears. She beat it. Lily clapped her hands, her rabbit bouncing in her lap. "I told you the blasters would win." Ethan pulled her into his arms, his body shaking with sobs of joy. "You did it, Princess. You really did it." Months later, life looked different. They moved from their cramped apartment into a small house with a yard. Lily ran across the grass barefoot, chasing butterflies, her laughter filling the air. Ethan watched her from the porch, every sound of her joy, like music he never thought he'd hear again. The Anna Carter Foundation grew beyond what anyone imagined. Donations from across the country poured in. Hundreds of families received help. Children began treatment who otherwise would have been lost. At the first gala, Ethan stood on stage, again stronger now, Lily at his side, telling their story not as a tragedy, but as proof of hope. David Monroe was there too, not in cuffs, but in a suit, working as the foundation's director of family counseling. He spoke with parents on the edge of despair, his voice heavy with honesty. "I know what it's like to feel like there's no way out," he would say. "But there is. Let me help you find it." Ethan had embraced him once quietly without cameras. Two fathers who had stood on opposite sides of a gun now stood shoulder to shoulder, building something greater than either alone. 1 year after the night of the shooting, Ethan walked Lily to school. She wore a backpack too big for her bouncing as she ran ahead to join friends. She turned waving. "Don't forget to pick me up, Daddy. I won't." Ethan called back, his chest swelling with pride. He stood there long after she disappeared inside, marveling at how ordinary the moment felt. Ordinary and extraordinary. That evening, in her cheerful pink bedroom, he tucked her in. She looked up at him with wide eyes. "Daddy, do you think Mommy knows how good everything turned out?" Ethan smoothed her hair back, the same gesture Anna once made. His voice was steady. "I know she does, sweetheart. She's been watching us the whole time." Lily smiled, drifting to sleep. "I think so too. I dream about her sometimes. She says she's proud of us." Ethan lingered in the doorway, watching her breathe safe and strong. His heart swelled until it hurt. Later in his own room, he looked at the photograph of Anna holding newborn Lily, both glowing with health and joy. "Thank you," he whispered, "for the love that never left, for saving us even from beyond, for her." Outside stars pricked the sky like distant lanterns. Somewhere in the quiet night, a church bell chimed. In the next room, Lily dreamed of butterflies and bright tomorrows. The single father who had once stood on the edge of despair now knew this truth: when you choose to protect others, even when you have nothing left, the universe has a way of transforming your darkest nights into your brightest dawns. And with his daughter's laughter echoing in his heart, Ethan Carter finally believed they were exactly where they were meant to be. Your thoughts will help us create meaningful stories. And if you want to hear more powerful healing stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Click the bell icon so you don't miss any new episodes. And most importantly, share this video with people who need a little hope today. Thank you so much for your time. We hear you, we listen to you, and we are honored to tell these stories for you.